You're good.
What would you do?
You're good. We're just gonna fix this piece.
Corey Jeremy is planning to come. He'll just be late.
Oh, great.
So
Okay.
I told him he has a thing that ends at 6:30. I was like, just come. I
Yeah.
imagine we'll be here for a while.
Okay.
So
We
do you want me
could
to go ahead and put his name? down now?
potentially hold the action on the items if you wish, but we can move through the presentation.
I think we have enough to
Okay.
just keep, if we-
Perfect.
It's the thing that we really need discussion on is at the end.
Yeah,
And this
that's,
thing did I lock this? Yes, I did. I just.
oh, oh, no. Sad. Summer, maybe.
Summer.
For those of us,
Oh,
Recording in progress.
I'm sorry.
Turn your
I think everything's on plan. I don't know what else to turn on.
your volume. It is. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, you're good. Perfect. Thank you for all those folks watching on YouTube. We're just coordinating our hybrid meeting, make sure all
I said
the
that last time, but apparently.
systems are streaming correctly. So just a few more moments of technical security, make sure we're streaming
Thought
and
you were gonna be up
recording.
here.
You wanna hold this on your seat?
A mess today,
Thank
Corey.
you.
Interact.
Floor is yours, Kaya.
All right. We are recording and live. Cool. All right. I call to order this Thursday, October 13th, 2022 meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission at 6:03 p.m. First item of business is citizens to be heard. If you are here and you would like to speak, now is the time. Unless you are here to speak on something that is a public hearing item, we will have public hearing speak time during those items. So if you're here for the vacation of the right of way on Rimrock Road, I think that's our only public hearing tonight. But otherwise, please feel free to come to the mic if you're here for that. And we did receive a couple citizen comments via email that pertain to one of our potential action items, and I think we'll address those at the time, if that sounds good. All right, it appears that no one in chambers is here to speak during citizens to be heard. So onto our next item, number 3, approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve from regular meetings on September 8th and September 22nd. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to move to approve this.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, we have a motion by Ruben to approve the minutes and a second from Jill. We can do a roll call vote whenever we're ready.
All right, for the roll call vote, Ruben?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Kaya?
Aye. All right, those minutes are approved. Thank you, folks. Our next item of business is a public hearing, item 4.1, public hearing on proposed ordinance number 2022-16, an ordinance approving the vacation of the abandoned right-of-way known as Rimrock Road on property located at 1492 South Aggie Boulevard and Highway 191, Moab, Utah 84532, which is parcel number 010018-0002. This is a public hearing, a briefing, and a possible action. We typically will have some background information and a briefing, then open the public hearing, close the public hearing, and then take possible action.
Yes, and the way we've structured this tonight, Anna will be presenting on this item, but also in addition is the phase 1 and phase 2 additional action items tonight. So to best encapsulate what is happening, this presentation is actually going to include duplicate information. So we're going to really move through the overall understanding, open the public hearing, and then we can always answer specific questions on each action item, but this should give you the understanding of the overview for tonight. So Anna, over to you.
Okay, so what we're looking at tonight is the Aggie Townhomes Phase 2 site plan review approval and the right-of-way vacation of a portion of the Rimrock Road. This is a part of the USU development that we've been working on for a little while. And this is phase 2, so that this is going to be the multifamily / twin home, 12 building, 24 unit item. And then, so just some background on this, applicant Brooke Cole with GWC Capital on behalf of the City of Utah School and Institutional Trust Land submitted the City of Moab City site plan review application on June 13th, 2022, and the right-of-way application to vacate a portion of Rimrock Road easement on the property on September 13th, 2022. The Planning Commission forwarded a positive recommendation to the City Council for resolution number 2022 for the townhome subdivision application to City Council on August 25th, 2022. And then the City Council approved ordinance number 2022 -14 for the rezone of the northern portion of the property on October 11th, 2022 that is associated with this project. The proposed site plan, I believe you guys have seen before, includes the 12 building of twin homes that are going to be sold individually for the Aggie Townhomes Phase 2 project. This is also, as you guys probably have already seen in the packet that we send out, the elevation plan, so you can get an idea of what the buildings are going to look like when they're built. And then again, we're going to go through the narrative of the project. The property was annexed into the city in 2012 as part of the USU Moab campus future development. The subject property is part of 2 larger parcels that total approximately 40 acres. And then this development will be 5 acres. The zoning for the property is now all R4 manufactured housing residential. And then the proposed development again is the 12 twin home structures for 24 units. The property is currently a vacant lot that is part of a much larger proposed development for the USU campus. And then the property to the northwest is currently vacant, but is proposed to be the Aggie Apartments Phase 1, which we will also discuss tonight. Let's see. So far in the process, the project will require the following processes in addition to review level 2 approval. The zoning amendment to change the zoning for 1.5 acres of land currently zoned CR to R4, and that was completed. We are looking at the vacation of the right of way for the plat with where Rimrock Road is located. And then we are going to be discussing that item today and then forwarding a recommendation to City Council. So City Council still will need to do approval. And then hopefully at the same time, we'll also have the final plat approved by City Council. The recommended motion for this particular item is to that they are required to have a lighting plan that is that meets the requirements of section 17.09.060 through 17.09069 of the Moab Municipal Code. Since we've already gotten the rezone approval, we don't need that as a condition of approval. And then City Council also needs to approve the final plat for Townhome Phase 2. And then City Council also will need to approve the Rimrock Road vacation as a condition of approval. Are there any questions about this item?
Pretty clear.
Okay, and I guess we'll go ahead and is it okay if we do the motion for this now, or do you want me to finish?
We'll
The
open
Rimrock
the public
Road.
hearing
Have a
Oh,
public
first.
hearing.
Okay,
In addition, Kai, we do have one of the project team from the applicants,
mhm.
as well as 3 additional applicants on Zoom land. So at an occasion that you would have any questions or like to hear from the applicant team, we can bring them off of the waiting room of Zoom into the gallery view for the chamber.
I mean, I'm happy to. They took the trouble and we took the trouble to set it up. So if they have anything to add, I'd be happy to hear that prior to opening the public hearing.
Sure. Hannah, if you would, go ahead and exit screen. That way it'll give us, I think, a larger view of the Zoom participants.
Okay, so stop share.
It may or may not, I'm not sure. Jess has stepped out for a second, but for those of us, I know we have Eric, Brooke, and Mike waiting for us in Zoom land. We are in gallery view, as I understand it right now. So as you unmute and begin speaking, you'll be shown larger in our chambers here. And then we have Nathan as well. If you'd like to step up to the mic, and whoever would like to address the commission, you're more than welcome to jump in.
Hello.
Glad to be here today, just to answer any questions you have. It's fairly simple, just the vacation of that right away. That really is redundant now that Aggie Boulevard has been built anyway. So I don't know if there's anything more I need to say.
Great. Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
Where's the right of way now? I think the last time we had a conversation about the townhomes themselves. That was just general questions we can come to in a second. But that was just something they're subject to be, they're supposed to be sold, right? And that's going to be sold privately.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
I don't have anything.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Brooke and Eric and Mike as well. We appreciate your
I'm
participation.
assuming that silence in Zoom land means that there's nothing to add.
I'm getting thumbs up. Yeah. I
Okay,
think we're in
great.
good shape.
Okay, so we have if I can find one of 12 tabs on my computer.
Only 12.
Sorry, it's one of those days. I will now open the public hearing on proposed ordinance 2022-16, an ordinance approving the vacation of the abandoned right-of-way known as Rimrock Road on property located at 1492 South Aggie Boulevard and Highway 191, Moab, Utah 84532 at 6:14 p.m. We have not received any new public comment on this public hearing item. There are no folks present in chambers who would like to say anything. As far as I'm concerned, everyone is good. So I will now close the public hearing at 6:14 p.m. If commissioners have questions for staff or applicants, you can ask them now. Otherwise, we can entertain a possible motion, which as always is in your agenda summary under the options.
Kyra, there's a little bit of wording that needed to be changed on the motion.
Okay.
So if you would read it off the slide, then we would get it on record properly. Okay.
Great. And it looks like
What was changed?
yeah, I know. I was trying to
The
articulate what the
part where
change
it says
was.
city council. is not on
Ah,
the Agenda.
got it. There we go. So the only change, if folks are listening or watching, is that we added who the motion would be forwarded to, which is Moab City Council, of course. So there is a motion for positive recommendation potential in front of us on the screen there. If someone would like to make that, you can. Otherwise, as always, we can continue the action if we have specific direction on things that are still needed, or can make a negative recommendation to the city council.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I move that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council on ordinance 2022-16. An ordinance approving the vacation of the right-of-way known as Rimrock Road on property located at 1492 South Aggie Boulevard and Highway 191 Moab, Utah 84532 is not on there, but I added.
Okay, we have a motion
And a second.
and a motion from Jill and a second from Ruben. Any discussion before we vote? All right. Whenever you're ready, Corey, we'll do a roll call vote.
All right, Jill,
Aye.
Ruben.
Aye.
Kaya.
I vote aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. On to the next, an action item, 5.1. Proposed planning resolution 11/2022, a planning resolution conditionally approving the Aggie Apartments Phase 1 Level 2 site plan on property located at 1492 South Aggie Boulevard and Highway 191 Moab, Utah 84532. This is a briefing again from staff and then a possible action, but no public hearing. Whenever y'all are ready.
Okay.
While Anna's preparing to share the presentation, we do also have Chuck Williams, city engineer, available to discuss potential questions regarding the engineering condition of approval. It is fairly straightforward, but Chuck was willing to come a little bit early to support on any of these Aggie items prior to the
Great.
fourth item where Chuck will be participating.
I just really want to know what Chuck is looking at out the window right now. Oh, I thought there was like an animal or something cool. I wanted to know about it. Okay, great. No, I was like, is something fun happening over there? I thought it was like a raccoon or something. Yeah. Okay. All right. Ready when, is this you again, Anna?
It is.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so this is basically, the subject property is a part of two larger parcels that total approximately 40 acres, like phase 2. But this will consist of 15 acres. The proposed development is going to be a 288 residential unit development consisting of 14.
Oh, Chuck, you may need to. Oh, okay.
Consisting of 14 apartment buildings in total. The project required a lot line adjustment to change the configuration of the lot to accommodate this development. The new boundary description was reviewed and approved by city staff, and the new boundary description has been submitted with Grand County for recording. There is also and then again, it's also a vacant lot. And then it is being approved concurrently with Aggie Townhomes as well. So this is just a rendering of what things are going to look like when it's done, what the buildings are going to look like. Here is how the layout is. And so you can kind of see where all the apartment buildings are going to be. The only part of this project that is in the R4 zoning district is the parking area at the bottom down here on the south side. And then this is just a rendering again of what the apartment's going to look like when they're finished. So there is also some additional requirements with planning staff and with engineering staff. The planning staff needs them to submit a lighting plan that complies with our dark skies ordinance. And then there is also some additional engineering plans that are in relation to the detention pond. It requires a 6-foot fence and then also some warning signs and then a mitigation plan for the basin hazard. And I would have Chuck explain what that means to you if you'd like.
Yeah, do you want to just come up here, Chuck? That might be easiest. Or there. Unless you want to be Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have a detention basin, which is good. It's part of our ordinance to detain flows in a project such as this. And it's relatively deep. It's, deeper than 6 feet, usually up to 3 feet. We don't require fencing. So we're requiring fencing, and we're still working with our engineer. Mike Bradshaw and I had a conversation last week about the trick of it is what type of a fence that's not ugly, but yet it's functional for what we needed to do. And so the key there is per the standards, we need to have the dimensions no greater than 6 inches between the staves, so that a child can't get caught in there. And so Mike and I talked about it, and I think they've got some ideas for how they're going to come up with it. And I see no reason why we can't come to resolution on that. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from anyone?
So the requirement, how big is the bond? It's just 6 foot high fence around it, gate to it.
Yeah, when it's dry, it's not a problem. When it's
real wet.
filled with water is when it becomes the hazardous.
Yeah.
And that's why we want the fences for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is the fence big enough that like flows will still be able to?
Yeah, so
Okay.
this isn't like jumping out of a creek. This is, it's got pipe and spillways entering into the basin.
Okay,
So,
great.
Yeah,
Great. Just structures around water areas
Oh,
will
yeah.
all seem to be less than a great thing recently.
oh yeah. We've seen lots of examples.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. Great. I mean, I'm glad I'm glad that it has that big of a detention basin. Honestly, I think erring on the side of bigger, especially now, is something that is certainly prudent. Because if it has nowhere else to go when it overflows itself, then
It's part of our ordinance and we enforce it. It's just part of this is because of the topography. That's the reason it ended
Yeah.
up being bigger.
Yeah.
If they were down in the flats, it would not necessarily be that deep.
Yeah.
But I think they've worked with a viable design
Yeah.
and it should function as just kind of the last things coming to agreement on the fence.
yeah,
And I have no doubt we'll do that.
you could put lots of native plants and be great in the basin. Works well.
Maybe.
You should.
College ranger.
Helps keep it together.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have any other questions. Chuck, thank you. Anybody else? Jill?
No.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
So like a chain link fence.
That the ugly
That's-
thing, I think, was the
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
concern.
that's what the developer doesn't want is a chain link fence.
Yeah.
Kids
So
can
there-
find that.
Mhm.
There's some other designs out there that their engineer and I went over last week that we can reach a happy medium between safety and
Not having to put like the slats in.
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet. Yeah.
All right.
I think that's a fine sort of outstanding item to have. All right, great.
And again, we do have applicants available for any questions. I'm not sure if Brooke, Eric, or Mike, or even Nathan have anything to contribute at this point. Again, very straightforward at this point.
That's a big project.
I'm excited these are getting built. Yeah. Things are moving. Okay, so we can, as usual, we can conditionally approve the planning resolution with or without modifications. There are some outstanding comments that we should read into the resolution if we do that, that are on the screen and on our agendas for the recommended motion. We can table it with specific direction as to why, or we can deny it, again, with specific findings for that decision. So there is a recommended motion, and if you read that, please read the following conditions. I think they're short enough. It's nice to just read them into the record.
I'm fine with the project. I was just wondering about parking lots going forward. And if that's a conversation we'll have on them being covered,
For up at the
just
Aggie
in general,
property.
parking lots in the city.
To the effect of reducing heat island or?
The island, covering, I don't know, solar is something that we've talked about and getting those
Mhm.
moved. I know it's expensive, but
Certainly. I think as we approach our future strategies with the city council, I don't know if that's directly one of the items that
Yeah.
has been identified, but it could be something the planning commission recognizes as an element of parameter review, depending on what type of use we're looking at. So if we're looking at, okay, this is clearly a larger scale development where it'd be appropriate to maybe add a condition like that. we would obviously want to weigh the cost to the developer and see how that is going to affect the project, whether we're deterring projects by encumbering it in that way. However, if it is essential enough to our community for whatever the purpose might be, it could be something certainly to add.
Or incentives.
That's it, yeah.
Incentives are always wonderful, wonderful tool.
Great tool. Love that tool.
Tool.
So with this project, there are some landscaping requirements for the parking area that are included in the packet. I didn't put it on the slideshow, but there are some landscaping requirements for them as well.
Yeah, the form of canopy and vegetation.
Yeah.
Is that middle area in that sort of central parking loop? What is, apologies, what is that going to be? I'm just curious.
Let's have our applicant answer that. Nathan,
I'm seeing that sort of island and then
yeah.
what on our screen is the north.
Yeah, there is
one.
a landscape plan specifically for that area that's in your.
Oh, great.
signal. Mhm.
Great. Missed that. Let's see, vicinity map, floor plans, site plan.
I've got it here. I don't know if Eric's on, he could probably share his screen and show it. It's halfway through there with a little circular area in the middle and trees all around it.
Yeah, I am on, Nathan. I don't
Okay.
have it available with a PDF, but basically it's a common area that has a shaded seating area with picnic tables. And it's on sheet LP 1.4.
And then same benches probably. Crime parking.
Yeah. Thank you. I was just curious. I like to see what people are doing now with these newer sort of larger developments, because a lot of it's fun. I don't know. I just enjoy. I just enjoy seeing it. Okay.
So
Thank
I
you.
do have a part of the landscaping plan up now. Oh,
Okay. Again, back, we have the recommended motion. I
Yeah, there
will
you go.
go ahead. Oh, nice. There it is. I will go ahead and make that. I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission conditionally approve planning resolution number 11/2022, a planning resolution conditionally approving the level 2 site plan for the Aggie Apartments Phase 1 project located at 1492 South Highway 191, Aggie Boulevard, Moab, Utah, with the following conditions. 1, all outstanding comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the Moab City Engineer and Planning Director prior to building permit application approval, including a lighting plan which complies with the requirements of section 17.09.060 through 17.09.069. And B, the proposed detention pond will require a 6-foot fence and install a warning sign along with submitting a mitigation plan for the basin hazard.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, I think we're ready for a roll call. Corey?
Perfect. Thank you. Jill,
Aye.
Ruben.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and for showing us the landscaping plan as well. All right, moving along. Next, we have 5.2, a proposed planning resolution number 12/2022, a planning resolution conditionally approving the Aggie Townhomes Phase 2, Level 2 site plan on property located at 1492 South Aggie Boulevard and Highway 191. Moab, Utah 84532. This is another briefing and a possible action on Phase 2 of the same area.
The presentation essentially was bundled into our original presentation for the vacation. So if there aren't any specific questions on that, the materials were in the packet as far as the floor plans, site plan, and elevations, but generally speaking, pretty straightforward as well.
Again, a question not regarding the resolution specifically, but I was just wondering what the student body count was projected to be for the total project.
The body count?
I don't know that. It's pretty small right now.
Sorry. Hopefully Really nothing.
Well, I hope
God.
it's not a body count.
We got the there's a
Enrollment.
6-foot wall in there.
Maybe if Brooke's on, he can chime in if he knows that.
Projected
There's not
enrollment.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Brooke. With the master plan that was done early on, they assumed that might get up to about 1,500 students on the campus over a 10 to 15 year period of time.
Okay. Yeah, I think that helps with showing that, like, the last apartments is 300 units and we're close to and going to there when we talk also about housing.
Yeah.
It's weird to say, okay, we have 1,000 houses coming up, but how many people are coming in?
Yeah.
I just
Well-
questioned about that.
Well, hopefully most of those students will be local. That was the goal. So, hopefully it's not, driving total 1,500 people coming to the town.
And you saw
So-
those apartments. They're not like student dormitories. They're just
Yeah.
normal apartments.
Normal
They're good for
apartments, yeah.
anyone, to live in.
Yep.
So.
Mix. Great.
I don't even think, but still, it's like 100 people a year coming from Grand County and only so many returning.
Yeah. Let's see. We have, so Corey, I apologize. This is the phase 2 plat, same deal. Could you pull a map up, Anna? My apologies.
Yes, the phase 2 site plan. So we've reviewed the preliminary plat for this. We've reviewed the vacation and also the zone change. So now it is actually just the actual construction and site plans that we're looking at specifically with this
Great.
approval.
So everything, if you're watching at home or watching online, this is sort of just moving through the things we needed to deal with before coming to this part of the approvals this evening, or potential approvals. So as always, we have a recommended motion in our packet. And I will go ahead and make that again. There are several comments and conditions that need to be addressed still, and we'll read those out. I will skip B though, because it looks like it's stricken on the most updated version. I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission conditionally approve planning resolution number 12/2022, a planning resolution conditionally approving the level 2 site plan for the Aggie Townhomes Phase 2 project located at 1492 South Highway 191, Aggie Boulevard, Moab, Utah, with the following conditions. 1, all outstanding comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the Moab City Planning Director prior to building permit application approval. Comments include a lighting plan that complies with the requirements of section 17.09.060 through 17.09.069. B, City Council approve resolution number 22-2022, Aggie Townhomes Phase 2 Townhome Plat. And C, City Council approve ordinance number 2022-16, Rimrock Road right-of-way vacation.
I'll
Well
just
done.
second that.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks.
All right. If you are listening, we now have 4 planning commissioners in attendance, up from 3, which is great.
Perfect. We'll still do the roll call vote. Jill,
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Ruben?
Aye.
Kaya?
Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. This is a big process. We appreciate your hard work. Yeah, they're pretty great. We're lucky.
Thank you, Nathan. And then joining us, Brooke, Eric, and Mike again. Thank you so much for making the time to join us virtually. We'll be seeing you soon as we move on to the next items with you guys.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time this evening. Have a good night.
Thanks, Brooke. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. We now have, I should have done this at the beginning. I got out of the habit. Planning Commissioners Ruben Villapanda Salas, myself, Kaya Marienfeld, Jill Tatton, and Jeremy Lynch in attendance. And we also have our City Council liaison, Luke Wojciechowski, in the audience, reporting back to City Council for us. Okay. Our final action item this evening is 5.3. a proposed planning resolution number 10-2022, a planning resolution conditionally approving the parking exception for the Jailhouse Cafe expansion level 2 site plan on property located at 101 North Main Street, Moab, Utah 84532. This is a briefing and a possible action. This will likely be a large item just because it's decently complex. There's a lot of things to consider. We have gotten some public comment, some feedback from the community. So we want to make sure we're being very diligent in our decision this evening. So Corey, thank you for putting in the hard work to present this to us in a clear way.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Currently, thank you all. And it is indeed complex, especially in the motion structure. So if we need to slow down, which is why we scheduled this at the end of this meeting, we can slow down to really understand what approvals are consequential to others, and then what the larger scope of the approval would look like with those additional applications and processes we're going to have to go through. In the audience tonight, we do have the applicant and project team available for questions, but in addition to that, during the presentation, to, I think, better explain what this is, which is an applicant request, the applicant and project team will come up and present to the Planning Commission as well. And then we have Chuck Williams, city engineer, to rejoin after that request to help facilitate his and mine our final comments as we wrap into what will open up as a discussion between yourselves and the applicants, and then staff, of course, available to exchange. We do understand that you, and thank you for the applicant team for being patient. It has been a long road to get here, especially with the continued item. Thank you for being open to the continued item for the Planning Commission during the last meeting to take some time to think about this, allow staff to be present. I appreciate being here for this item. We'll start going through the presentation here. The idea here to expand on the framework of our municipal code, why we're in a situation where we're kind of looking at the situation that we are within this parking code context. So that framework and how we've come to this was through the site plan application for the Jailhouse Cafe expansion. During this review process, it was clear that with the development of that property to what is kind of a most feasible extent, there were clear discrepancies in the ability to park out. Even at the most minor improvements to the property, there is no horizontal space really, as is consistent with a number of our Main Street corridor commercial buildings. Through that, there has been prior acknowledgements within the C3 zone, which is our central commercial district, and then even more specifically, our Main Street aligned commercial properties, that there is minimal opportunity to expand on whether it be parking or even commercial space. So that to that effect, the general plan does acknowledge the intent to allow for a more economic diverse redevelopment or further development of those properties, being that most of them are historic in nature or of a minimally built out context. They're about half built to what their potential could be, with the potential of 3 stories or 40 feet. Most of these are single story structures. At that time, the municipal code had subsections that allowed for conditional approvals or exceptions, in this case, that could lead to also conditions of approval to allow for that development. So running through this little bubble chart here, that through this application, we identified the limited opportunity to install the parking required on this property. So through that, we often for an applicant say, okay, here's your 3 tool mechanisms that you might be able to use. One being a parking exception, one being the existing building code section, meaning if there's an existing commercial property, you get credit for that area of commercial space, so you're not essentially getting double counted as you go to redevelop. And then finally, the option for a payment in lieu option. And then after that payment in lieu is complete, you would return back to that site plan for whatever the final yield requirement is for Planning Commission approval. This takes the bubble context into a more applicable, like this. These are the extractions of those code sections where the bubbles were being referenced. So this is our site plan requirement code section onto off-street parking requirement regulations, by kind of a static standard. This is what we're required generically. And then in addition to that, the parking exception code, the existing buildings replacement code, and then a little bit more fully into the payment in lieu option. Oh, excuse me, this is backstepping a little bit. These are the criteria that we're going to be looking at tonight for the parking exception. So there is a more robust analysis of how the planning commission can use terms to determine an exception, or as this is a discretionary action, base your findings for decision off of these criteria. And now this slide, we are lagging a little bit. Sorry, everyone. This slide, hopefully you're seeing this, should have a little highlighted piece at the bottom, is our payment in lieu section. Now, what I'll say is, and maybe we'll just move on here, this little section highlighted at the very end identifies no more than 30%. This little code section had been an overlooked section in prior understanding of what our code allowed. And because of that, the applicant had entered into pre-applications, gosh, almost 2 years ago, Will, some long time ago, for this project. And as we, and of course, with COVID, there's been ups and downs of spaces between.
What are you talking about?
Right. That at that earlier time, there was different staffing within the planning department. And then even prior to that, conditions that had been discussed and or approved, the understanding was without that 30%. And I'm going to show why that's particularly relevant to why this has gotten so complex. So the previous understanding of how we could park a requirement is that a project obviously is going to need to fulfill 100% of its requirement using certain conditions. So of that 100%, there's obviously going to be a section of on-site supplied parking, really just standard. This is what's to be expected, standard parking. And then in addition to that, we obviously know that there's the parking exception mechanism, which was intended to, through that criteria, by a data format, grant exception to a project by proving through data that whether they're employees or their static of operations or the surrounding area has a calculable reduction, that you're proving we don't actually need that standard of what's being applied. So this exception traditionally had been applied as a little bit more of a proving ground than it was as a narrative request. And to really quickly check in, because this is important, are we understanding the distinction I'm trying to make here?
Mhm.
One is kind of more data driven, one's more of an appeal of what we have an option to. So that was the understanding, with the idea that whatever is left, so you supply as much as you can, you get an exception for as much as the data supports. And then beyond that, you have the option to pay fee in lieu of. This was really kind of the original understanding that we entered into with Will, that yes, you can achieve 100% of your parking through these mechanisms. There's going to be a financial component on your end, a discretionary element on the planning commission's end, and then of course, whatever the site can facilitate. What we're looking at now, and what, as we went through this as a practical application and went line by line, which we're committing to do because we find these little tiny pieces of code that really can change the whole perspective on the code, is that the supplied parking will go to a certain extent, obviously. The parking exception based off of data can only usually go to a certain extent. It's not a grandeur of exception that way. But the payment in lieu can only be locked in at that 30%.
Yeah.
So depending on what the data yield was or what is available to the supplied parking, it leaves a gap, a hole, of which, so for that less than 100%, that's basically a project breaker. It means they've done everything they can within the code parameters. There's just not that one more additional tool to help get them there. So that would kill the project, basically. What we're proposing as an understanding, and this is after working with the city administration, working with Chuck as a city engineer in the engineering department, and what we're actually looking at specifically with this project. So you're going to see this obviously bigger skew here in these boards, is that with this property, there's a very limited area for supplied parking, 3 spaces in particular, a locked in payment in lieu of only 30%. So they would be willing to pay more, but we cannot charge them more. That is what currently in the code we're locked into, which requires them to meet that 100%. They're asking, in addition to the data, that there is a larger appeal to grant the larger exception. That's what's being really applied and discussed tonight. So this is being recommended on behalf of staff because it is the only option available to the applicants for this project to be successful. So now it becomes a decision for the commission to see, does the request, does the data and parking study that's supplied meet the qualifications necessary under those criteria for you to make that approval. In the future, to help, I think, clarify and fix this possible gap that will continue to come up, because this will be to a certain degree a case setting approval or disapproval, in that there are many properties that are wanting to expand, wanting to revive or redevelop, but they cannot because they're in the same exact situation here. There just is no more horizontal space. That what a potential option for a code amendment could be, and especially looking in the C3 downtown core, we know there is limited supplied parking area. That the parking exception kind of returned to a little bit more of a data driven, how much is it actually really not requiring? Because that is the only, I think, authentic way to make that exception, is that you're basing it in facts versus in appeal, because that gets a little bit out of what, from a staffing perspective, is consistent and reliable, is it comes down to a discretion action by the commission, which could be really at your opinion. We appreciate your opinion, but we like to have a little bit more firmness in what people are able to do when they're coming to.
You run into trouble there, especially with the payment, with money involved and having a discretionary payment in lieu. At least that's my understanding.
I mean, no, we do
I'm
that
not sure I'm
for, we do that
understanding
like in
that.
the Wahoo, you can do a payment in lieu of.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
viable mechanism,
Okay.
certainly, and it's
Discretionary, they'll
data-based.
apply.
So the payment in lieu is very structured. As you can see, this exception is a discretionary action just for the planning commission. The payment in lieu, which we will be pursuing if this moves forward, has a public hearing. It's a far more structured because there is that money allocated. So it definitely is more structured. I think the point I'm making here is as we reduce this parking exception to what it kind of originally was intended for as a data reduction, we've flipped that. The 30 and 70, so to speak, would become flipped. So that the parking exception would be available up to 30 or whatever is most reasonable. And then 70% is available for payment in lieu. The reason being, especially in this core, is as we move forward with our dispersed parking, hopefully it does move through and becomes in construction and installed in a reasonable time frame that these businesses will benefit from them. That's the idea, is that the dispersed parking will facilitate for downtown needs, allowing these economic properties to redevelop in that way. But it gives us the means to help maintain and produce the parking. So what we're looking at now is granting an exception, an exception for these spaces rather than an allocation of funds to go put them somewhere else, if that makes sense. So jumping back again to this little bubble route and the particular spaces that we're looking at for this project is originally within the count. We're looking at 60 spaces. 13 of these spaces are being credited because of the existing commercial floor area, the existing business that's going on. With 14 spaces available for fee in lieu, which leaves the 30 spaces to be accepted by the planning commission. Then, of course, with 3 spaces to actually be provided on site. There were components of the general plan I wanted to share. I was going to put them into a more palatable format, but it really is just more prudent to share the actual page locations of these. So I can share these to the public if there is any interest, but what I'm showing here is that there are grounds for this discussion as far as the economic development of the downtown and producing through the planning commission and mechanisms, the ability to cultivate that. We're not coming out of the blue here saying we're just going to give favoritism to the C3. It was during the general plan that identified this is an economic core and we need to make regulatory accommodations for businesses to develop or redevelop to be successful. So there's within this goal 1, and Anna was the one that sourced these. Goal 1 within that element 1, and then it's on page 40 is the next item. So these are just excerpts from the general plan, which is element 3, goal 1. both of these are speaking to promoting the economic diversity of downtown. Okay. Now onto the site plan to give a little context. Thank you for bearing with me. This is a big item. To look specifically at what the project is proposing. This is essentially the presentation that you were able to view during our last meeting. The property, which is really three properties actually, in our C3 central commercial zone, is the existing Jailhouse Cafe with really kind of currently one use. What we're looking at here is a development of the property, both with a basement level, expansion of the ground floor level, a second level, changing of the use into a tavern. So technically of the same eating establishment, but of a different trajectory. So and I'll let the applicant speak to the different operational times and operational scopes of those different businesses. And then on the third floor would be a residential development designed for occupancy by either the owner. And it's two dwellings. I think currently designed to be occupied by the owner and then staff members, or just available residential on the third floor. So truly mixed use in that way. This narrative scope of project was provided by the applicant and then also contributed by Anna in the original presentation. I'm going to continue to move quickly through this. These were the floor plan sections of the proposed plan. So the basement area and first floor, and then second floor and third floor shown there. Side scope elevations. These are obviously preliminary renderings. I don't think these were essentially to an aesthetic point showing materials, but they are showing scope of construction there to maximize the ability of available space to allow the floor area that they need.
So this is.
This is Main Street, correct?
Which is the view from 100 North. Sorry, it's hard to see that. No, I guess that would be that'd be the south.
This is the laundry
Yeah.
next door. This is the jailhouse.
Yeah.
This is the jailhouse for Maine.
Oh, there we go.
This is for looking as if you're down by the Hoodoo, I suppose, from
Yeah.
the west side. And then this is over by, I think this is identifying what Doughbird location might be, this little
Okay.
dashed location there. And this-
Maximizing space,
yeah,
for sure.
Again, into the background materials we wanted to share. This is a lot of words, but it does on record show the process that Will has been going through, like we said, for a couple of years now. In this proposed parking exception request, this was amended in the way that originally the applicant, so the parking study isn't going to reflect these exact numbers. We have been working with this applicant team and they've basically amended their request to come into compliance with what the staff recommendation was, because at the time and what is available to them was to ask for a full exception. So 44 spaces, they were asking for full exception with no fee in lieu. It was what the original parking study was going after. But after communicating and working with the applicants, they said that's a reasonable component to follow the code to the furthest extent it can. So now we have a consolidated recommendation versus a staff recommendation and applicant request. So we are all on the same page requesting or recommending the same numbers in that way. To clarify, 60 spaces required in total, 13 of those being credited, 3 spaces being produced, 14 being paid fee in lieu, and then 30 being accepted. So for tonight, we are just looking at the exception for the 30. The fee in lieu will be another action before the planning commission following a public hearing. From memory, I believe it is just a planning commission approval. I don't think this item goes to city council at any point. So you'll be the land use authority throughout this process. And then the site plan will be the final step once these approvals have all been in place. To maneuver back to this, and this is once we, I think, conclude our questions, conclude our presentations, I'll bring this back up on the slide. These are our criteria, just to keep in the conversation as we're moving forward to make sure that we're basing this decision on the appropriate criteria. And then here's our very lofty motion. The motion is structured in such a way because we are essentially leaning on additional approvals to make the whole context work. So without any of, they all have to line up with a check mark of approval. If any particular element of this were to be denied, the project would not be able to function because it is contingent that all of those elements work. So that's the reason for such a lofty motion there. But Kaya, to your point, we will probably read this whole motion tonight, just so everyone's ready. And you're very brave, and I appreciate your participation to do that, so that we are getting it incomplete on the record if we do. At this point, that concludes my bit of the presentation. I'd really appreciate if you'd welcome the applicants on to give their presentation and explain their request and explain the product and business that they're hoping to produce.
Absolutely. If y'all would like to come up, you're welcome to. Looks like we have some visuals.
Yeah, I'm a lot more learned actually.
I see there's a monkey riding an elephant. is
So
what I
Will,
see.
if you would, before you begin, and you're welcome to maneuver around the area.
Yeah,
We're at Zoom land right now. So if you'll just, for the record, say your name, and I guess we all know you're the property owner here, but your name into the microphone, and you can carry the microphone around so that Zoom people can hear you if you are wanting to move about.
Is this variable?
I thought there was a remote.
don't carry the microphone.
Okay,
No, it's kidding.
that was bad advice. I thought we'd,
That's
Hello?
better. Yeah,
You
you
have
can
to-
see the extent of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
that'll work.
I'm Will Petty, the owner of the Jailhouse Cafe. This is Loretta Atkinson, who's been working with us for 25 years as a manager and bookkeeper and financial person. This is Gary Ranch, who grew up here, and he's been working now for, I don't know, 5 years after working for us before. It's a very long-term business, and I'm really happy to be able to tell you what we're actually doing after all of that technical stuff, because the technical stuff isn't very fun to listen to, and it is not very convincing. And I want to tell you why this project is really great for Moab and why we're very excited about it, and why I think you should be too. I started the Jailhouse Cafe 30 years ago. At that time, Moab wasn't a tourist town. We started the Jailhouse Cafe just as a labor of love. And we like to think that in this time of increasing corporatization, we still have that ethic. We've just been doing the same thing we've always done, and we love doing it well, and we want to do it better. And we've found that our premises have severe limitations. I mean, the reason we only do breakfast is we simply do not have room in our kitchen to keep a hamburger patty for lunch or anything like that. We've always wanted to do more. And this came to a head a few years ago. We started doing breakfast burritos, and the staff was serving this salsa in 1 ounce ramekins. And I said, that is just way too small. We need to have 2 ounce ramekins. And they said, our kitchen is way too small to have 2 ounce ramekins. And they actually took me back and convinced me that our kitchen is too small for 2 ounce ramekins. So we're really looking forward to being able to do what we do a lot better and in many different ways. And so I'm going to introduce you to this project. And I don't know, do I need to carry this microphone, or does my
Just
voice
because we're
carry?
recording.
Okay,
So
okay.
it's for the public record and for
okay.
minutes more
Great.
than anything.
If you
Yeah.
need an extra hand, Will,
Yeah.
or Jess may be able to help.
That is really kind of you. Thank you. We like to feel that we're a Moab icon. Our building is the first county courthouse of Grand County. It was pink before the Jailhouse Cafe. It was actually the Jailhouse Gallery in the 70s. So Moab has had this pink little house on a main corner of Main Street for about 50 years now. And we're very happy to be continuing that tradition. And one of the themes of this presentation that I'm making to you is that we could do this project a lot more efficiently. then we're choosing to do it. You know, the parking ordinance is asking us basically to tear down what we've got, use our credits, find a place to put some spaces on the lot. But that's really not what we're about. And one of the big things that's important to me is that this building is preserved. I love this. I think it's a real Moab icon, and I would hate to see it not be a part of our downtown. You saw that rather characterless plan on that Corey showed on the screen. Our plan is to actually make this building out of brick and have it look like a traditional old Western storefront. It's not going to be a modern building with aluminum siding or something. And actually, at this point, Corey, I'd love to talk about what we're actually planning to do on the interior. And you said that you might have
Yes,
the floor plans available that I could point to.
yes, might just take a moment to.
And Luke, you're welcome to come up here if you can see better.
And actually, if you guys have any questions, just interrupt me during this
Yeah.
talk.
Well, maybe, and I'll preface by saying, I think there's definitely concerns from neighboring properties,
Mhm.
just because it is such a big parking there. And I think all of us and most people understand that, like, it's not actually 60 spaces. That's just what the code requirements and zones call for, but it's still a sizable number on, I think, what has become an extremely harried street, particularly in the last 3 years with the food truck park, with the laundromat, and with that corner getting popular sort of at all times of day with Trailhead across the street and the coffee roasters and
Mhm.
sort of overflow for some of the businesses there, like the bike shop. And now you have the rental place that's right there sort of with everything else. And that seemed to be the main concern, I think, from folks in the community that have weighed in, adjacent property owners, is just that it's already a struggle parking wise. And so anything that seems to sort of piecemeal give exception for parking requirements generally, but I think particularly in that area is something that people are, I think, rightfully concerned with. And so anything that you can say to sort of assuage those concerns, I think is probably the most useful, because I don't think anyone up here questions that
I
this is an awesome
definitely-
business
yeah.
and we'd love to
No,
see you
I
succeed.
definitely intend to.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. And that's
But
really
I'd
the
love
thing.
I'd love to show you what we've got.
Yeah,
going on,
absolutely.
because
No,
I'm
totally.
actually really excited about it. This is the first time, I've been able to talk about it.
Yeah. No, I'd love to
So,
see.
So actually, that is the second floor. Can you show us the first floor? Or no, I'm wrong, actually. No, that is the first floor. Oh, sorry. So what you see here is that the existing cafe remains on the corner, hopefully for all time. And our outdoor seating is being reconfigured to create kind of an L shape. So we will actually have this sort of landscaped pocket park off of the Main Street sidewalk, which I think will really complement, it'll continue to complement the historic building the way our current landscaping does, but it'll actually be a better, more attractive layout. And our kitchen is planned to move to the upper left. So we'll actually have this beautiful new kitchen, which is, really kind of bigger than we need, but we're so tired of working out of this tiny little room in the back of the old cafe that we're very excited about it. And then we'll have a new dining room for the restaurant to the south. And that will actually look out onto First North. And so that is what we're actually doing with the Jailhouse Cafe. But we're actually doing a larger plan, and out of the same kitchen, we are serving on the upstairs a new restaurant. I mean, I don't know if it can be called a new restaurant because it will be served out of the same kitchen. But it's going to be called the Fancy Glass Tavern, and it's a speakeasy style piano bar. And what you actually see, if you could actually take us back to the first floor plan, we have a secret entrance off of First North, where if you look at the far left, you'll see that there's a sort of mysterious door that you walk into, and You go down a corridor inspired by this corridor in New Orleans. There will be no sign outside. You go upstairs, turn right, and you're in this tavern and piano bar, which is inspired by a lot of classic sort of wonderful old saloons of the West and Southwest. And we've actually, if Corey hadn't explained about the fact that we'd been down this road for about a year before we learned about the 30% requirement, you would think that we were very presumptuous. But in fact, we've actually, we've bought a Steinway grand piano.
That's
for,
awesome.
for the bar. It's, we've collected mahogany columns for the bar that will, 4 of them actually, that will support the bar, between the bar and the ceiling. We have a collection of work of, okay, thanks. We have a built-in telephone booth from 1905. We have a collection of 40 19th century captain's chairs that will sit around the tables. And we also have a really great collection of local artists, including Adele Alsop. This is one of the largest paintings that she ever did. Elsie Holiday, who's probably the preeminent Navajo basket weaver today.
That's beautiful.
Chloe Hedden. And so we're really trying to make this into an incredible showcase of the best of Moab in the style of the existing Jailhouse Cafe, which has always been sort of about Moab quirkiness and not about just doing something that other people are doing in other places. And so, and the reason that it's called the Fancy Glass Tavern, I'm so sorry. The reason it's called, the reason
She's leaving us.
Yeah.
We're making her work
Okay.
for it. So
And the reason it's called the Fancy Glass Tavern is that if you order a drink off of our top shelf drink menu, it comes in a fancy glass.
I love those. Those are amazing.
Anyway, so that's basically what we're doing. And now I would like to tell you why I think that we deserve this parking exception. And I think it isn't just because the city made a mistake or didn't know what was going on with the ordinance, and this is the only way we can do the project. I think that there are really good reasons. First of all, sorry. I have a note part or something. Oh, okay.
There was no limit. So whatever was not being able to be produced could have been paid. So there was the understanding.
So I think one of the reasons that it's justified to give an exception to this project and not make us build as many spaces as would normally be required is that because this is kind of a project of the heart, it's filled with incredible inefficiencies. We have this theatrical hallway going up to our tavern. Every square inch of this space is calculated as requiring parking. So we have this hallway, we have in the basement, we have sort of an extra kitchen, which is meant to function as a bakery. But if you know about restaurant kitchens, you'll realize like the main kitchen is totally jamming. It has lots of people in it. A bakery has like 2 people in the morning, but we're being charged for that at the same rate as any other square foot of restaurant space. There are a lot of inefficiencies in the way we're planning the site, as I said, and so I feel that, you know, on an intuitive level, this project really shouldn't require as many spaces as a project of comparable size that was really planned to just pack every square inch with kitchen and dining. The parking ordinance was designed for sort of if you actually look at it, I think you'll realize it was designed for a more suburban pattern of development, sort of a more, and it's a little bit out of date for, I think, what Moab wants in our central downtown. We want a vibrant pedestrian area. And I can give you sort of an interesting example of how this works. I brought this Crayola pad. Let's say I wanted to build a restaurant and it's 900 square feet. That requires, I think, three parking spaces, just at the simplest level. Is it 300 feet per space?
200 feet for
Oh,
eating
okay.
establishment. So
Okay, so let's say it's
Right.
800 square feet. That's 4 parking spaces. Now, if I'm out in Spanish Valley, I can double that by adding another 800 square feet, and I provide 4 more spaces, and I'm fine. I meet the requirement. But now, if I'm downtown and I'm in an environment where I have to build vertically, I have to put this square on top of here, and I mean, the rule of thumb is that your upstairs spaces are not going to be utilized as much as a space that's right off the sidewalk. So intuitively, you wouldn't expect that an upstairs space needed as much parking. But actually, under our parking ordinance, you don't have to pay just for this upstairs space. You probably need 2 staircases for fire egress. You need an elevator. We're having dumbwaiters because we're serving everything out of the same kitchen. So according to the parking calculation that you get from our current parking ordinance, you're actually paying a lot more in parking spaces for a second floor space than for a first floor space of the same size.
Is it usable space or is it?
no, Will's making a great point. So
Yeah.
the way that building code or architects will often or building officials evaluate spaces off of occupancy definition. So how it's actually occupied. The way our code is very simple in nature. And so it's any occupiable space. So it does have exemptions for utility trenches, chimneys. So things of nature that are clearly unoccupiable, but stairways, bathrooms, all those things that typically wouldn't be applied in a building code or architectural sense are in our code.
Which is why like garage company has silly parking requirements.
Sure.
For the amount of actual space that is.
Right.
And so moving on from that, one thing that's really important to consider is that there's a huge synergy downtown. Sorry, between hotels, motels, and restaurants. Most of our customers are coming from hotels and motels. We're in an area where Moab has the greatest density of hotels and motels of any place. I mean, within 3 blocks of us are hundreds of hotel rooms. And it's in the interest of the city to provide a place where those people can walk to, not necessarily drive to. They can have a nice evening with their friends. They can drink a bit of wine or whatever they want. They can go back to their hotels safely on foot. It actually works very naturally that way. And it really is in the interest of the city to recognize that so many of those customers are actually parking at their hotels and walking, and that's what we want them to be doing. Finally, the city's on the eve of building a lot of extra parking spaces downtown, which will alleviate a lot, I think. And also parking seems to, I mean, we had this weird pandemic boom in Moab, like, things were pretty mad around here, but business is down, our business is down, a third or something. And I think most businesses in town are down a lot. Town does seem a lot more normal now. I know the last couple of years seem pretty frantic, but I think that it's justified for us to be able to operate with the parking spaces that are proposed. And we are proposing to pay for 14 spaces, which is a significant amount of money as a contribution to those spaces that Moab is putting on the streets. So any questions? Anything I can answer?
Commissioners? Questions, comments,
I do
anything?
have a comment then. I didn't want to ask a
Yeah,
question,
Yeah,
but
go for it.
I do appreciate that you're leaving the old building. I
Thank
think
you.
we tear too many old things down
Yeah,
and then we forget our past, so I appreciate that. Are you leaving it pink?
Definitely leaving it pink. I mean, we gotta leave it pink.
I like the pink building too.
Me too.
And I just ate there last weekend with a friend visiting from town.
Uh-huh.
And the Southwest Eggs Benedict is still delicious, so thank
Thank
you.
you.
No, I mean, this is a super tough issue and I know that y'all appreciate this. And I just want to, apologize that you're in this situation in the first place, because it does seem like you have these really wonderful plans and there's something that, for better or worse, is a pretty big impediment one way or another. And I, personally, I think it is in the best interest of the community to make businesses like yours and to help them succeed and to grow as times change, which it seems like it really is. I think the idea, of another later evening space in that area is a really great idea. It sounds really fun. All the stuff that you have is beautiful and it would be really fun to patronize it. But I just want to make sure that we are trying to comply with code the best that we can, which is our job. And then also just making sure that we're taking everything into account that we possibly can.
Mhm.
And I want to maybe see if there's ideas too, because I'll be frank, I am one of the biggest proponents of changing our extremely outdated parking requirements that you will meet in this town.
Mhm.
I and a former planning commissioner, Becky Wells, talk about it every time we get together, about how to do that, and particularly in the C3,
Mhm.
because you're exactly right. It is our downtown corridor. It's higher density commercial, and the way that use patterns are going, we want to make sure that we make it more walkable, encourage that, and not really have this focus on this, like you said, sort of suburban idea of what parking is required. And so I think it's totally appropriate. What I'm a little wary of is doing it in a piecemeal way, because you do have other business owners that are downtown who would jump for joy at having less parking required for them right now with their existing businesses who went through the whole rigmarole that y'all are going through right now. But I also understand that it moves really slowly when you try to do a code change or something. I think that could be perceived as major, like a zone wide change.
We actually looked into that, right? And we were told that, it's really best to do it this way for now, and maybe in the future, the code will change for other businesses, but we're kind of a test case, we're really the first people
Yeah.
that come to try to do this.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting process of discovery. And I think you had advice from the city manager that they didn't want to change the code right now. They would rather deal with it this way. But that doesn't mean that you guys shouldn't pursue other changes in the future.
That's, I think, pretty succinct. In the narrative, you might have kind of caught that moment in the previous understanding. And then as we've been moving this application through, the more full understanding coming, there was a period, and the applicants have been very patient with us, of actually the planning staff bringing this before administration, saying, we're identifying this issue. So you'll remember that presentation, there was the gap, the blocks that showed the gap. That's where we're at now. And that was basically identified of, we have this error of formulation. So we should fix the error, whatever that means. That's really the city council and your commission's job to assess how to do that. But there is an incomplete formula. We don't have 1 + 1 = 2 right now, which simply is a project killer for any project in the C3 right now, kind of period. So we will not see a development in the C3. Now, upon that, bringing that to the administration without a case, as Will has said, or a particular project to identify this on a problem with a particular parameter, the city council was unable to, or at this point strategically in their priority plan, unable to, from a staff level, advance any code change. So it could have come from the planning commission, or it could come from the applicant, but for the sake of this project, it was most advantageous for the project to advance, see what the planning commission was willing to do under the current circumstances, which we've combined, I think, from what the original request was to the planning review. The applicants have come into line with the very most maximum ability to process this code the way it is. So following this approval, like I said, approved or denied, there are going to be findings of why our parking code is not there.
Yeah.
For the benefit of this particular property, and that's why I'm referencing the general plan, is the backing that you have is that this isn't being a one-off decision necessarily, but you are making your decisions based off what your directive is from the general plan. How can you most best make these discretionary approvals rooted in those findings? So the staff was very careful in the way we approach this, that we are recommending this motion if that is the criteria are found to be approved through the planning commission. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you find that the criteria have been met to your standards, this would be the recommended motion the staff would make. So to Will's point, he's really doing the very best he can to move
Yeah.
forward.
Oh, absolutely. And that is not in question to me, and I don't think any of the other commissioners either. It's a tough situation to balance, and I think it makes me particularly anxious because this is a planning commission call
Mhm.
that will not go to city council. I would really like it to go to city council if there was a way to make that happen. Like
Nope.
truly, I just think this is something that warrants a broader chime in.
We have
dare
the
I say.
authority
Yeah.
to expand process within, we can't step upon due process for the applicant. We have a code that requires certain procedures. In some scenarios, it is available that we can go above and beyond, but we cannot give away our jurisdictional powers, saying we can't skip process. We
Yep.
can add additional process, but the very best that would become is a recommendation potentially by the city council. I'm not aware of any structure in the past that has ever been done that way.
Yeah.
I'd have to look into see if that's available to us, but this would be your call under our code.
I know. And of course, it's like the most complicated thing we've had in a long time. Of course. Which I think is all to say why I want to just be very careful and just take it seriously. And it is not for want of absolutely adoring your business and thinking this is a super great idea and wanting to see you succeed. Just prefacing with that, because I genuinely, the feedback that we've gotten, I've spoken to individuals, to some real estate folks, developers who were generally supportive of this, understanding that the C3 downtown should be trending more this direction. My main wariness is just coming from code not being caught up yet. And so I'm wondering, so if we were to forward a positive recommendation, we would still have to have the underlying code change happen to allow for more of a fee in lieu.
Yes, so what I think we're looking at, and I can go back to
Yeah,
the
that-
presentation if it would help.
That would be great.
And I do want to make a note that we do have Chuck Williams here and available, and we're technically still under the purview of presentation.
Yeah.
I think once we're kind of concluded with any, because we can certainly come back to
Yeah.
interactions with Will. I think this was kind of more
Yeah.
Will's platform to present. But if I can, I'll bring up the presentation.
Yeah.
Explain a bit further.
Real
Bring
quick,
Chuck
while-
up and
While I
we'll,
have you, Will, I have one
sure,
remaining
certainly,
question.
certainly.
Have you spoken with or seen comments from adjacent property owners?
You know, I actually, I had a nice meeting with the owner of the laundromat. like,
Okay,
But it was probably a year and a half ago.
okay.
And he said parking was a concern,
Mhm.
and, I respect that. But it's also kind of a decision about where you want the future of the central commercial zone to be.
Yep. Absolutely,
You know,
totally. And he was one of the people that sent us an email yesterday. That was generally, not generally, it concludes with, I don't support the parking exception. Just articulating actually reviews of the laundromat that mention how difficult parking is
Yeah,
right there, which is
The-
unfortunate.
and I feel like he and I have a pretty good relationship, and I
Yeah.
have made an effort to talk to the neighbors on both sides. I haven't actually, I know Cara, but I haven't actually spoken to her about
Yeah,
this particular project.
yeah,
But I wonder also if the owner of the laundromat realizes that without the exception, the project is like totally off.
totally off. Yeah,
And
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of confusion about that. People look at it and they say, oh, wow, that seems like a big exception,
Mhm.
but we've done absolutely the best we can, and we're paying as much as we can in paying
Yeah.
payment in lieu. And I'm not sure that people realize that it's kind of all or nothing here.
Yeah.
In sharing the presentation again, what we're seeing here again is the existing, a representation of the existing framework, that we are limited to a 30% payment in lieu option, a parking exception that was intended to go as far as it could go, and then that unaccounted for parking area beyond what is supplied. This framework, being that it does not equal 100%, will continue until there is a case to prove that it won't. Furthermore, from the staff's perspective, and again, I appreciate Will in this project, but it's for us at the staff department, an opportunity to fix our code. So I'm also looking at it from my own
Yeah.
strategic point of view, is that we need to get to a place where, let's see,
You know me, I am team fix the code, like
and it
in all things.
it was and this is where we had a lapse of time between Will moving forward, where Will gave us the opportunity as staff to try to fix this parking situation so that he could apply under the new code, but it was we were unable to move it forward from a staff perspective at this time.
Yeah.
So what we're
Possible framework.
this possible framework, this is an option, because we don't have to amend the fee in lieu. We just need to close that gap however the commission feels is most appropriate, whether that's broadening the exception to be that it is an appeal and it is kind of a subjective move every time, or we bring the exception back to a more database and we make the fee in lieu an option. So if we don't mind, I want to talk, because there is going to be an additional public hearing with an additional item for the fee in lieu. We'll spend a lot of time on it at that time, but right now within our master fee schedule, the parking fee or payment in lieu for one space is $8,500 per space.
Yeah.
Now within that, Will is committing to pay for 14 spaces, which comes out to just under $120,000. This is all, of course, gonna be public record at some point, so we might as well talk about it now. But prior to that, Will, in the passion of the project and the understanding of the need for parking, was going to be willing to pay up more, up to whatever was necessary, of course, not just wanting to pay for the fun of it, but whatever was necessary.
Yeah.
That funding, because of that payment in lieu condition, goes directly back into the city's parking, transportation, and maintenance programs, specifically for traffic mitigation. So it's not that we're going to take this money and go and spend it on affordable housing, as much as we all might like that. It has to go directly back into parking. And now with this dispersed parking and additional transit programs, all of those things that are going to help decongest or take the need for off-street parking a little bit away from the parking, that's the intention. So while I think Will is making one argument, my argument is that we right now ought to be, in the interest of the city, trying to recur those fees rather than accept them away. Will was also willing to do that, but we cannot do that until there is a case. So unfortunately, we have come to the head of the road, in which if the criteria for the exception is met, this would give Will the opportunity to move forward while still providing to the city the opportunity with funds to go directly into the improvements in that area and also distributed parking in that space, while improving the economic development, and then give us the grounds of staff to say, see how much more funding we could have had we fixed the code. That's enough incentive for you and the city council to say, yes, let's take advantage of this better opportunity to develop our downtown
So
core.
at the end of the day, we could end up with a percentage framework that looks like what's shown on the screen right now, if everything
Correct.
was right.
So
then.
this is what Will, when the pre-application was set up, was looking at, which obviously would have been quite a bit more than $120,000 for 30. So we're looking into the range of, 240, which for our maintenance and ability to actually address some of our parking issues would have been wonderful. But right now it is a middle ground that we're accepting.
But we have to do any parking exception before we amend the payment in lieu. That's what you're saying.
Yes, we have to.
I
We
was
have to
wondering
make-
if we could
we have
amend
to
the
make an
payment in lieu
action.
and figure out how much exception we're actually giving after.
Can we do that?
If we cannot do that, what we can do right now is this. This is what we can do right now.
Yeah.
What is being proposed is this. But because this doesn't equal 100%, no matter how, because we're locked in that payment in lieu and he cannot supply the additional parking, that exception must take on,
Wait,
the exception must take on
would you go back one? Sorry, Corey. The one with the largest supplied parking.
this one.
What is that?
This is our traditional understandings. The property comes to develop or redevelop.
Uh-huh.
They're gonna, and this is with other cases,
Okay.
gonna be able to supply
This
14,
is in no
15.
world a reality.
So
for
the
this
planning,
project.
planning commission in, I want to say it was may have been 2019, 2020. The Four Corners Community Behavioral Health Center did receive a parking exception.
Yes.
It was based off of the employees' schedules, number of employees actually riding bikes. So it was very data driven, and they only, I believe, we only accepted 13 spaces of, I think it was another large requirement of 60. They provided 35, and there were some additional conditions there. And this is all off of loose memory, of course, from years and years back. But that was the idea, is the exception was fairly limited. They were supplying a good majority, but the fee in lieu was is limited, and they were in a different zone, so it wasn't even viable to pay off
Yeah.
the rest. They just managed to make that work
Yeah.
with the exception.
Also, if I could say something, Corey,
Of course.
before you think you're giving up like a huge windfall for the city here, we would have asked for a pretty significant something. Because I think when it actually comes to the point that you start looking at what parking requirements should be, in some commercial zone, you will realize the synergies with hotels, restaurants, how things work together. And it actually doesn't make sense to pay quite as much.
That's a wonderful transition into where Chuck was hoping for. So I know we don't have Will's engineer, Eric, architect, that's right, excuse me. And then Set Engineering was participating on that as well. So Will's
Who's your architect?
Eric Schroeder, yeah.
Chamberlain.
Chamberlain Architects. So they've been working with the staff to get these calculations where they're at. But speaking directly to the state, I think we've transitioned into, like Will is saying, there with this long hallway, with these open space areas that he's providing really for the benefit of the patrons or the community. That's a legitimate reason to come to the commission and say, well, we're doing something a little out of the ordinary. Can you grant us an exception for legitimate space that shouldn't be counted? So I think that is what Will's saying, is there's a lot of space here that Will believes shouldn't be counted. But in addition to that, Chuck can provide clarification on the original parking study that had been used to supply this parking study, as well as clarification on the downtown dispersed parking. Thank you, Chuck, for waiting around and participating.
Oh, yeah.
I'll stop sharing screen here.
Thanks for having me. I just, so parking is, I've been here 2 weeks, and Dave, the ex-city manager, 3 city managers back, came to me and said, what's the number one traffic problem in Moab? I said, my opinion is parking. He said, well, I said, what's yours? And he said, bypass. We need a bypass. So, you know, there's differences of opinion on both those issues. However, I'd encourage you to think about it, especially as if you go into looking at parking and changing the code and everything. Think about it as a snapshot in time. The more I'm in this business, the more I think about it is just to, and I won't take much of the time being philosophical, but think about the flood that we had on August 20th. We had 7 hours of 6,000 CFS. All that water came down at once. A year ago, everybody was worried, Jeremy, we're worried about, and we still are, but worried about the drought condition we were in. So if we had all that water that we had in 7 hours spread out over a year, we'd be happy. We wouldn't have all the problems that were resolved on flooding. And what happens with parking, my point about the snapshot in time, is it happens quite a bit in traffic engineering, is we design for the peak use period, right? So at 4 in the morning, there aren't a lot of parking issues in Moab, in downtown Moab. But the parking study that was done, and you've seen it, and it's on our website for anyone who wants to.
Yeah, and I had Corey send that to all of us too this
Yeah.
week in preparation.
Yeah, I know you did. That's good. But I just wanted to point out maybe a couple slides, and this is from a presentation we gave to the commission in 2019, before the dark year. And this map, I think, is a key one to point out that we talk about utilization, where utilization is greater than 85%, which essentially means there's 1 to 2 available spaces per block. Meaning that of the 100% of the spaces that might be available on the street, 85% of them are being used at that snapshot in time, right? And you see that, and then down here, there's the parking utilization color-coded map. And this is West Center. So West Center is the heavily parked, worst utilization. And then the, the orange gets to be the second highest level of utilization, which is Main Street and East Center. And then as you get into the greens, you see like here's 45 to 65, and here's 100 North, which is Jailhouse is on this corner right here, 45 to 60. And 100 North is identified, it has 2 or more hours of 85% utilization. But on this heat map, it's not the most critical spot in terms of availability of parking spaces, right? So, and the reason to look at that is if people can't find a parking space, they keep driving around, right? Or they go further out. That's a choice that people get to make. It was why we did, not to visit the past, but that's why we put a parking garage in the downtown area so people would have the opportunity to go there. And things such as we're talking about tonight, businesses could have bought into parking
Yeah.
spaces, but not to go back to that, but the
Well,
central.
it would have made this a lot easier.
Yeah, it would. And but now we have this map, and so I think this just shows that the Jailhouse is in an area of not the highest concern based on utilization, but it's on the fringe. So there's some,
Yeah.
I think it needs to be addressed. And as we move forward, I think we ought to look at some of those other issues. And then the other one I wanted to point out before I move quickly to the.
But that was a snapshot over 2 days in May in 2018, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
And
I mean,
here's
there's
the
been
other.
some use changes since then.
Well, here's one of the cool things about that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I was going to bring it up is that technology's changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They flew 11,000 aerial photos from a drone to create these images.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason we can't do that once a year and
Yeah.
do an update. Maybe it's every anniversary of May 7th and 17th and 18th.
Yeah, that'd be
We
fascinating.
go do it and fly those parts of town. Because the non-downtown areas of Moab, there are some parking issues
Mm-hmm.
in terms of capacity and utilization. But mainly when my experience being here, as long as I've been here, which is that 5 years, is that's my parking space you're parking in.
Oh, yeah.
It's the spot in front of your house, which is a different issue
Yeah.
potentially, even though there's a lot of ownership from downtown businesses too, to be honest with you. I've heard that. But point is, I've thought about this, that maybe that's what we do is we go and fly once a year to help give us guidance on changes that are happening. We're going to have a transit system. My belief and my hope is we'll be going to council in November with a successful RFP to establish transit that could be effective with the 2 shuttles to start after, by February of this year, next year, excuse me. And I also thought maybe this was a good opportunity. So that would be an opportunity to have less people needing to park. Figure out how many, figure out the peak hours. That's going to drive part of our scheduling of that transit is because of this kind of information, which says these are when parking needs are the highest. And then the other thing, if I may, Madam Chair, is
I know. I remember that the study was fascinating, like the most utilized space and the highest turnover space, surprising no one, is like the second space in front of Moonflower.
Yeah.
And the one where the vehicle didn't move, which is like undoubtedly someone who works at the Best Western, was like on West Center Street in the shade, right on the back by 100 West. Like I remember that like concretely what the results were.
and we use that study.
Well, this was going to be my question, Chuck. Is that section of 100 North, is that an area where the city in the dispersed parking plan is planning to reconfigure parking in some way.
I was just gonna show you. The
Oh.
answer is yes, but then Adobe Acrobat decided to say no. I think I can bring it back. I've had that open for 3 hours waiting for this moment.
It's probably why it quit.
Yeah.
It's
Tired.
tired.
Taking a nap.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize for that, but it's, oh, maybe I'll load again. The direct answer is, so we've done, what we're adding to by the dispersed parking project overall in the downtown area is we've got 11 streets that are gonna be impacted. And our goal is at this point, our goal is 184 new stalls.
Mhm.
And at this point, we're at 190 new stalls. And that's kind of been dispersed, but it's been difficult. I mean, it's changed, it's morphed since we started the dispersed parking design, because as an example, in front of Moonfire, we had some ideas, and when we had their workshops, they were like, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, so we ended up not doing it. But
Is that back in or was that one of the back?
no,
end?
I'm talking about dispersed parking changes with more angled parking, with median parking.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, there was some, we had some support and we had some negative, and
Yeah.
you know, we try and dance that line.
That's hard.
And yeah, it's just not always. But I do know this from memory, even though this isn't loading, because I looked on 100 North between Center and 100 West. We'll be adding 12 new spaces.
Say that again, where?
Right on by where we're talking about 100 North
Okay.
between Main Street and 100
Okay,
West.
great.
Yeah, we're adding 12 new spaces there as part of this design. Council gave us the go ahead to finish design. I think it was last month. Might have been, yeah, it was last month.
Luke's
And-
nodding behind you, so.
Yeah, I didn't want to put him on the spot. But he's not shaking his head though. But so we're moving ahead on that design, and my belief is that we'll go to construction next summer sometime. And this street is the likely candidate, 100 North and 200 North, to be there first, because we're not gonna
Yeah,
hit all 11 streets all at once. That'd be too much. But
I
we'll
mean,
have-
like rip the Band-Aid off.
yeah, talk about people walking. There'd be a lot of walking.
We're talking about congestion.
Yeah,
boy.
yeah, that's it, yeah. So I just wanted to share that, yeah, there's, in the overall parking picture, it's this, peak times that are important for you. That's something maybe in the future, if you want, we can talk about more and get more data on that stuff. But with the transit coming on and with the dispersed parking coming on, I think that the impacts, because they're, and correct me if I'm wrong, Will, you're gonna phase this project in, you're not gonna build it all at once, or are you gonna change it?
We're gonna phase it, and the reason is, we're gonna get the ground floor with the Jailhouse Cafe up and running first. But the tavern is very much a passion project. We want to have like deadlines.
Yeah.
So that will probably be years after, but the structure of the building will all be there.
Okay.
But
Use will be
Plus
phased.
won't be occupied.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my point there is that, well, the dispersed parking should be in place by the end of next year.
Well, before then.
Yeah, before they're fully built out is my point of that.
Yeah.
Long-
Wait, and I apologize, Will, I should have asked this earlier, and I'll answer in the mic so you don't have to come up, but I think use patterns really matter as far as what parking is required, and I know this is in the submittal as well, but your plans for is Jailhouse, so Jailhouse Cafe as it is now, as the breakfast place.
Yeah.
Will that be Jailhouse Cafe, the breakfast place, then the separate restaurant upstairs? Or it'll be Jailhouse Cafe, the all-day restaurant, and then
the plan is to do breakfast.
breakfast and dinner.
At the Jailhouse.
Okay,
And we could do lunch, but we have to do next. That's that. There's the lunch.
I mean, honestly, I think that would assuage some of the concerns if you don't do lunch, because the highest periods of utilization for the food truck park are around lunchtime, because that's when all of those places are open. So you'd almost be staggering, saying, we're here for breakfast, people are parking for breakfast. Y'all are closed in the middle of the day, everything's over at the food truck park happening. They all, much to my chagrin, when I want a burrito at 1 o'clock in the morning, are closed late at night. But, you know, they,
This is the guy. Are we gonna be able to
They're shaking, they're like, with what staff, basically. But I think that definitely does make a difference because like you said, it's the difference between having, you know, having all of the space being used at once, which is where the parking requirements come from, or all of the space being used sort of staggered. So, you know, it unfortunately doesn't help the laundromat. It doesn't help the bike shop. It doesn't help the residents that's right there. You know, who was the other, you know, letter we got with
It's
concern.
also got rentals right there or cheap rentals. that are
Yeah,
Parking and going.
I think the, you know, the one time when both, I mean, the tavern was not gonna get. both the price so much.
yeah. This
Are
is
you- are you-
Utah. It
And
couldn't
so,
be.
the one time when the whole place might be open, you know, the Jailhouse for us, having dinner, having person special.
Mhm.
That's when you would expect to find a way to see the position. Help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel that there was.
Mhm.
Is the plan to stay till 1? Open?
I'm sorry.
Is the plan to stay open till 1?
You know, the plan is to do whatever works.
Works, fair enough.
We've just found that, I mean, yeah, we'll try to stay open until one, I guess, but.
Yeah.
You just.
That's a question of heart more than anything.
And see.
Okay. How many seats are you coming from and going to?
We see 88
Okay.
between the job, the inside of the restaurant and the cheap pad.
Okay. Yeah. And then the patio is going, and then the patio will be a part of the new development.
Well, the patterns are maybe configured, so that they work better
Yeah.
with the.
So it sounds like the
Reconfigured.
phase, I mean, it's not, you know me, I try to, like, we have the expectation and then what could be the allowed legal reality, and I always try to plan for that, because you never know what's gonna happen. But with this sort of phased approach, it seems like that would be time for council to make changes to, you know, a code, city code or zone code, C3 parking requirements, period, as well.
Certainly within that time frame,
Yeah.
subjectively with this project, they will reach an entitlement approval with planning commission. So it will not
Exactly.
affect this project, but would
Yeah,
moving into the future. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Okay,
Because it's being proposed as one.
sorry, Chuck, we put you on the ice there for a minute. but
That's okay.
Plan.
I had to reboot. There's a
When
surprise.
did the food truck park really start? I mean, honestly, this year is when it really feels like it's picked up, but it's really started kicking operations. That was in 2018.
In 2018,
Yeah.
yeah, it was pre-dark. Yeah, so here, I just wanted to show you, this is 100 North with Jailhouse being here. And my memory was correct for once. There was the difference of 12. So there's existing 34 spaces. With this reconfiguration, we'll get to 46 spaces. And then across the main street on 100 North, we're only gonna pick up 5 new spaces. Up on 200 North, we'll pick up 11. So that's within a block this way, and this is within a block that way. So 11, 12, 23 plus 5, 28 new spaces within a 1 block radius when the dispersed parking comes. And then, you know, and I don't know how much more of this you want to see. I just thought real quick I could show you since
That's an old photo.
Yeah, it is.
it is. It is. But
You just put it where the empty lot on
Yeah, right, where the hotel doesn't exist yet.
and
Wicked Brew.
down on Center Street, we'll have the median parking.
Okay.
We'll pick up 12 there and 15 down there. So again, and that's within, that's within a block as well.
Mhm.
So it'll be distributed, you know, it's not like any one street has 40 new parking spaces. It just doesn't
Mhm.
work that way because we're limited by the curb to curb. But that's why we ended up dispersing across the downtown area.
Sure, it'd be nice to have a parking garage right there.
Yeah. It would have been built and making money by.
Man.
And
it's all
First
right.
West that's not getting anything, right? It's too.
Which one?
First West.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, because when we reconstructed it in 2018, you know, we put in the bike lanes, the shared use path. And
Yeah.
and those bike lanes get used a lot. So
They do.
in order to someone's asked us that, why not put parking there? Is the only way to make it fit would be to make those bike lanes go away. And they get used as well as the shared use path. So we like to do them.
I guess my biggest concern at the moment is still just, I mean, thinking about the laundromat and thinking about comments that we had. And it comes to public transport. I mean, that's another route that you can get things to and from. Hotel walking distance, that's really easy. It sounds like the big development's gonna add probably double or triple the seats that you guys have. And so going from there, I mean, breakfast time, lunch, you're gonna have. I guess the hope is that you get a lot of walkers. And people are forced to walk anyways, no matter what, however we reconfigure it.
Well, I will say I've noticed that a lot of the parking on 100 North, it's for the businesses and it's from patrons, but there's also a lot of employees that work along Main Street or in some of those places that park there all day. Like I have friends that work, you know, right around the corner from the bookstore who park in front of the food truck park and they're parked there all day long. So there's some of that too. And I think, you know, that was like the spaces where the cars never move in the parking study. It was definitely employees.
That was part of the thing with the garage was we were gonna offer $1 a day parking with the hope that employers would say, here's your $1, go park in the garage. So there's room for our customers
Yeah.
To
in the
park right
streets.
next to you.
Yeah, there's so many it's
Yeah.
I feel very passionately about this issue and I think making sure that we're updated, it's just so hard. And I understand completely why we have to sort of have a test case, but the problem with the test case is, like you said, you get, you know, vested rights if we, you know, do that regardless of how well it goes. You can't rescind the test case once the test case has been approved.
Correct.
And I just want to make sure that we are doing our job and being respectful of the other businesses in the area and property owners in the area.
Certainly. There are at least 2 pending site plan applications that are specifically waiting on this application before they move any further. A comment I want to address as far as waiting for us to amend. With this property, if we were to amend as is kind of proposed or recommended by staff to the most maximum opportunity, it would not effectively put any more parking on this project or downtown. All it's doing is giving us a portion more funding. And like Will had said, he probably would be expanding the exception as well. But there's no more parking coming from this project regardless of what we do. So it's a matter of how we're viewing the options to deny, and then we're holding off in the hopes of potentially someday getting a strategy to move forward in which there may be funding coming in, or moving it forward as is, which is admittedly taking what we have from the code and utilizing that.
Well, essentially you'll lose parking, right? Because if you're gonna have to man the restaurant, then you're taking up all the kitchen staff, managers, wait staff. And that's more cars that are parking. At least, right, like that's the sounds of it. And then you add to your parking spaces that never change. And if we're only gaining 3 from what we have, then you have to staff a lot more people for that.
I'm not sure I'm following. Not your fault. I'm just not sure I'm following.
I'm
that
thinking
correct?
about the long term, you know, when you say that there's no parking that's actually being added, well, you're actually losing parking. Because even if we follow it to the T on what you have, where, you know, 3 spaces are being gained, those 3 spaces are still being taken up by new staff that are needed to support the
Oh,
restaurant.
certainly. Those are, and that's private to the property, obviously. So those are not public spaces. And this is, the idea is, and I think Chuck and I have had this discussion in the past, of our code is currently straddling 2 different worlds.
Yep.
One world being small town, rural, Main Street development, where you can expect to park in front of any single business you want to walk within 10 feet of. And then the other world, which is economic diversification, development of a downtown into a vertical tier, which we've kind of discussed as part of the general plan and development plan, regardless of what we all think. That is what the general plan says, which focuses on leaving the parking up to the patrons or for the municipality to provide options for transit. What we're doing now is we're straddling both, saying you can't do either, because you can't develop further, and yet there is no horizontal parking to be had. So we're in a freeze. So every C3 zone property is essentially frozen until we decide to go back and decide that we want our downtown core to be more historic walk or parkable
Yeah.
rather. Or we decide that we're going to change that chapter into this is a more typical downtown when you think of a city, where you're expecting to walk a block or two. And I think Chuck has some stats on what our expectations of parking are versus regional standards of parking.
Our businesses, and this is my ignorance, forgive me, our business is allowed to, because like I get both the laundromat owner and the adjacent residents brought up the fact that it's like pretty like sad to make people walk with their laundry like 3 blocks in order to use the laundromat as the business there. Is there any world, and I realize it's a public street, where there can be reserved on-street parking for that particular business? And how does that work?
And we don't have that now. We have business owners who perceive that as such, but I haven't been able to find anything in code that says, yeah, I bought that parking space, or when I got my building permit, the city turned over the rights to that space.
Yeah.
No, it's public parking.
Yeah.
It's public right of way.
With
I
the,
feel like that would help assuage some of those concerns if it wasn't just parking free for all, for example.
Well, if I may, one of the things I've thought about this too is, I don't know that every lot in the downtown area, the C3 area, would be proposing what Will's proposing, because some of those, like the building that the spoke is in, right? It's already to the maximum height.
Yeah.
So there's not really much they could do vertically. I know there's discussion about adding the distillery next to, or the brewery right next to where there was a store before.
Yeah.
But that building, you could almost say, if you did a study of what's available downtown for vertical expansion, that would cause this increase in parking needs. That's probably a pretty relatively easy exercise to count the buildings and do that. And that might be a data set that might be worth having as I thought about this somewhat.
Well, like we do with maximum, with needed build out for housing and a potential.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's useful because I think, the slippery slope argument has been brought up before, which is certainly a thing. And, I want to change the underlying code with the parking, and then there's also the sort of consideration of existing business owners who, everyone was very welcome to apply for something like this for an exception to their parking requirements. But I think there's some who, it's more or less of an option feasibility wise. And you don't want to make it feel like you're sort of, there's other folks held to a standard that maybe is perceived as not existing to the same extent now as it once did. And I think if that's the case, we should encourage other businesses to come engage in this process a little bit more and to sort of spur some underlying code changes a little more. Because I think if more businesses weighed in on that and how much impact that would have on their finances or ability to retain staff or ability to make interesting new developments feasible, that's a big thing we want to be doing too. I'm just trying to be, I'm just trying to be fair, honestly, to everybody, but I'm curious what other commissioners think, because I am all over the place on this.
if I might, it's
Yeah.
almost as we're kind of, I think with Chuck's conclusion, I think you're done.
Thank
over
you,
there.
Chuck. That was really
Again, in the broad scope of this presentation, I think we're concluding the official staff presentation. Now, in the transition to open discussion and of course, accessibility to staff and applicants, I want to acknowledge the 2 citizen comments that came in.
yes.
I think everyone had time to review. I have the ability to share them if we'd like to reference them in any way, but in general, 2 adjacent properties, one directly adjacent, one property removed, not in support is the summarization.
Yes.
One is residential use in the commercial zone, and then one is commercial use. The commercial use, it does not have any parking. So I, of course, fully giving credence to their concerns for their patrons, obviously, given their presentation. But I do want to also acknowledge that there is no provided parking that they are giving to their patrons, so they are utilizing public parking as well. So not taking away from their credence of their concerns, but in the broader scope of things that yes, we'll
Absolutely.
leave it there. And we want to, have this on the record that we are fully considering both of those comments. So if there are any questions, let me know in specification to those comments made. But other than that, I think we'll release Chuck for at least the moment, unless there's any. Okay, we'll retain Chuck for a moment, but it's open now to you, Kai, to conduct the remainder of the item.
So the adjacent residential property owner had comments and concerns and was also requested that we denied the parking exception based on a variety of observations, a lot of which are very similar from the commercial owner, the laundromat owner. But I think in recent history, having been a huge issue for that particular problem was drainage, and what happened on August 20th with the floods with that property, because it's a historic residence and the old jail with, the adobe up here from like this. Actually went and viewed that property after the flood event, and it was completely a wreck. And I think a lot of it is because everything around it has been built up around it, because everything around that parcel is new. I'll actually, if it's okay, I'll just read this little portion. At our property with some of the oldest buildings on the street, 1892 for the old jail, which has a year-round tenant, and 1908 for the home, becomes a de facto retention pond for the street at certain flows already and flooded badly during the August 20th flood. We've graded our property such that these flows off Main Street and 100 North, depending on the size of the rainstorm, pass through the property rather than flood the old structures. Some of the water that comes down 100 North also currently diverts into the alley between the jailhouse and the laundry. The water then flows to the alley access behind Jailhouse Cafe that runs behind our property. If this is changed, the historic drainage of the street will change again, adding more pressure to our lot to be the de facto drainage pond for the street. Without addressing drainage as well as parking pressure, the change to this part of downtown will create more problems for longtime residents and business owners. I understand that that's not what we're considering tonight. It's not the site plan in general, it's the parking exception. But I think that is a good point. There's trees on the structure. There are things that inherently help with drainage that I assume will be going away with the site plan, just feasibility wise. And Chuck, I'm super curious on your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, so they have to address drainage on there as part of the development, and they have addressed it in terms of detention and retention on the site, so as not to increase flood flows from this development. That's standard operating procedure for us.
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
And we've gone through that with this development.
Yeah.
So on the drainage, I feel comfortable saying that they're not going to worsen the drainage if this is approved ultimately. And we spent a lot of time with it because we had the same concerns.
Chuck, are there ways to improve drainage outside of this project?
Yeah.
Just by fact alone of this project occurring as part of it, based on what's going to happen to the terrain and the landscape of this particular property? Can you assist neighbors, in other words, through this project?
I don't think so, because I'm not speaking for Will, but the site's pretty small, I think, and they're filling it up with building and parking. And I don't see a lot of room for beyond what they're doing, which is taking care of their drainage. I don't see. Now, we do have a stormwater master plan in the city that's got $8 million worth of improvements waiting to be funded. And we're looking at finding ways to do that. And if some of those solutions were built, I think it would improve drainage generally downtown. In fact, we know it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Would you just come to the mic if that's all right?
I'd just like to say two things. First, with regards to what the neighbors are saying, I'm not sure that their reaction to this is actually appropriate. And the reason I feel that way is they're basically saying, hey, let's stop this project. We don't want this project. But what I think I hear the city saying is, well, this is sort of a less than ideal way of doing it because we've got these limitations in the code. But even if we change the code to make part payment in lieu more flexible, we wouldn't want to make this project impossible. You know, like this project is something that should be able to happen. And so, and I don't want to discount the neighbors' concerns. I mean, I do think that they have concerns. But a lot of this is like, what kind of future are we seeing for downtown, and what do we actually want to see people able to develop down there? And I think what we're talking about with this parking is, it's more procedural. I mean, we may be annoyed with the way the ordinance is written right now, but if the ordinance were changed, there would probably still be a step 1, step 2, step 3 way to do this development. And so regarding those neighbors' concerns, do you sort of see what I'm saying? Regarding the neighbors' concerns, you know, they kind of want to, I mean, they maybe want to stop it, but given what we're trying to accomplish downtown for Moab, and when I say we, I mean the city and the people of Moab, I think that this is a very appropriate development. The second thing I would say is that I think it might be reasonable to ask you guys to make a little bit of an allowance for the fact that there was a lot of confusion about the way this ordinance read at, you know, when we started this process. It was, I don't know, it was 8 months into it or something before we actually realized. I mean, we had met with the city, we had been told that there was a process of step 1, step 2, step 3, and we would be able to do this development. It wasn't until quite a lot later that we realized that there was this surprise meeting with the planning commission, and yes, you can do it, or no, you can't. And in the meantime, you know, we bought a grand piano, we bought lots of furniture, we've spent huge amounts on the engineering studies that Chuck is referring to make sure that our drainage isn't going to impact anyone. And we've put a lot into this project based on an understanding. And I don't bear any resentment to anybody because of that, because I know everybody is doing their best at all times, and we should have read the code ourselves. But you know, I think it is, you know, I would like to ask you guys to make a bit of an allowance for that.
No, thank you. I'm really curious what other commissioners think. I think this is something that everyone should weigh in on if they have.
Well, after our last meeting, I kind of really observed this section of town. I get where we're at this conundrum of these are the policies, but we need to move forward. I forget, I just know, I know landmarks, not streets. So
Yeah,
I just know where places
yeah.
are. Where we put in the new parking kind of by the post office, where we staggered the parking on the street, you know, how you can, the cones that are there. So I particularly paid attention because I drive that way from 4th East, my house, and then I come down the post office street, so whatever street that is that the jailhouse is on. Multiple times a day, you know, I go that same route when I have to go to the district office. So I've paid particular attention to that new parking layout, and I have yet to see it full. So that was something to me, you know, like, well, I walk from my house to the jailhouse and I don't live that close. So whenever I go to breakfast there, I walk. I think generally most people walk. As I listen to this whole thing, I feel like this is kind of, and I get where you're coming from, that there is a policy in place and now we're trying to make this exception, but is that fair to everybody else that's done all of this? Not really. But this is saying, my feeling is this is telling us we need to fix that problem. And this is the way we fix that problem, is because this has been brought to light. And that's how we move forward with fixing the parking, you know, issue and the code in town by allowing this to move forward. It's not like next week this restaurant's going to be open. It's going to be a long time I mean, the way building is it's gonna take you forever to get all your parts. So, I just think by the time, if we go forward on this, I think that then we can fix all the code issues and the parking will kind of resolve itself. And I read all of the notes, and I feel bad for the people, but I also know, like, in front of my house, people park all the time and it drives me crazy, but it's a public road. And so, I get it. And I've had to use the laundromat when my washer broke and it was really hard. But, it is a public road and you have to park wherever the parking is available. And sometimes you have to walk. So I understand both sides. I just think with the time that it's going to take, we will be able to fix the code. That's how I feel about it. So anyway, that's my thoughts. So,
Thanks, Joe.
and it's, yeah, I see both sides.
I know
It is a little conundrum there.
It's a
Yeah,
super,
it is.
yeah.
So,
it's a big conundrum because
Yes.
I understand, the drainage, obviously this is not what we're talking about, but I think it's a thing that everyone's thinking about all the time now. Certainly Chuck's like smiling like, yeah, I've always been thinking about it. Now you're on my level. But no, I mean, I think even with obviously meeting the code for what the drainage requirements are, we saw that the existing, like the status quo in drainage in this area is completely insufficient if these big events happen. And I saw Car and Ray's property after, and it was a wreck. And I think the fact that you have buildings from the 1800s that if the water had gotten 2 inches higher would have been destroyed. I think that's also a historic thing that we should be thinking about in town. So it's just making sure that all these discussions are sort of on the table as we're talking about this, which is why I think I like your quote, like, is there things we can do to actually improve the
mhm.
drainage in the course of this property? I think because all the areas being used.
And there are,
Yeah.
and we have a plan. And by the way, we're literally looking at funding opportunities.
Yeah.
For all of that. And that's what I've done last month.
Yeah.
So
Can we take that stuff that they like put under sidewalk that's sinking and like put it under Cara and Ray's property and just raise it up higher than all the new commercial buildings?
that's a legitimate treatment
It can be.
for homes that are built probably in the last 50 years. I don't know about 100-year-old.
Like a stacked sandstone foundation, it would
No,
work
no,
necessarily.
Arizona, we did it all the time. We
They raise
raised
buildings.
houses,
Mhm.
in order to get them out of the danger zone from flooding.
Yeah,
It just depends upon the structure.
I was just joking, but hey,
Yeah, but I think that one may be too old. I haven't inspected it. But
yeah.
I'll echo some of Jill's sentiments about the project also, or just the situation. I'll also say that giving full credence to the concerns that we received, because they are real concerns as someone who's used that laundromat for years and who's spent time in the structures that were flooded. And we're talking about this. Those are real human concerns for the neighborhood there. Also say that they're all pre-existing this project. Everything that's an issue in that neighborhood is going on and has been going on for some time, not on account of this project in particular. And, wouldn't end by dint of this project or couldn't be alleviated, but there will be others. And just keeping this all in mind, like I said, to echo what Jill said, momentum is helpful with the growth that we're having. And what I'm hearing from city staff right now is there are opportunities above and beyond the development of this specific project through this project to improve the situation. And that's what I'm looking at personally. And so as I reflect on this, that's what I'm taking into consideration. It's kind of like Chuck was saying before, when you look at the snapshot, you can get very focused on parts of the frame. But if you look at it from the bigger picture, when there's an opportunity to make change through a single act, then that's valuable enough to pursue, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think the changes are coming one way or another, and in a lot of ways need to come, because what we're hearing now is that we have our what should be our densest commercial zone that cannot be our densest commercial zone or change with the times to be businesses and uses that everyone who lives in town and our visitors want to see. And I think that's valid. And if this is going to be, we have so little designated commercial space, and unless it can somehow be used
to its fullest extent, we're just gonna sort of stay in this weird stagnation pattern. And this, could very well be something that moves it up higher on the council's priority list. Having this, like you said, the test case to go on in this area. And I like that it's a test case with a local business who's proven that they're here for the long run. Also, I understand that things go wrong and y'all could have to sell the property tomorrow after getting these approvals. And I understand that that's something that is also, so it certainly wouldn't be the only thing we'd base a decision on, that like, it's just for you guys, because obviously it would apply to any owners of this property in the future, whether they want it to be something that everyone's like, oh my gosh, Moab doesn't need that, or it's the Jailhouse Cafe and a cool bar with a historic piano. Yeah. Which is wonderful, but Corey's seen me do this for years. Just, I want to make sure I'm thinking of all the possibilities and we don't step in something that is completely unintended when making a decision that's based in something we really want to do. And so these are just all the things that this isn't deciding one way or another. It's just all the things that I'm thinking about right now is like, someone could come in and buy it as like an Applebee's or something in the future. And no knocks to Applebee's. I love chicken wings, but
Full knocks.
To additionally clarify with that point is the way the approval structure is they will all be contingently linked. So the exception, the public hearing for the payment in lieu, and the site plan. So it's not that moving on from tonight, they could get this exception and then sell, and then whoever buys it gets this additional exception. This exception is for this project static. Now, what Kai is saying is this project is built, and then 10 years down the line, whenever it sells, hopefully not, of course, that the use, whatever it might be in the C3 zone that is permitted, could infill. So that, to additionally clarify, so that people aren't thinking that there could be potential between now and the final
Yeah,
approval of this
no, not that.
shifting, that's not the case.
One thing that we're just talking about is that it's a really wonderful whole organization site, which kind of guarantees that beautiful building on the corner is preserved, right? Whether I am, I don't see that.
Ruben, what do you think?
Why'd you have to come in with the Crayola pad? It's just, you hit me right in the heart with the Crayola pad and the pencils and the drawings and the
We're
pictures.
sitting here eating like warheads from the treasurer's candy stash with the Crayola pad, all having flashbacks to 3rd grade. So
Every day.
No, I think it's a good case, and I think it's what I'm fixating on is this whole payment in lieu. And I think that if it's true that this is the best route or the only route that we can go through with actually getting that changed and having a better conversation about it, then yes. But I really like the way that it has been faced, and I think that there's a lot of part in it, as if that is a criteria for approving something. It just, because I definitely came in with a no. Well, you can't do that. That of course that's everybody's case, and I'm sure that's still going to be echoed. But I think one of the biggest points about it is that I want this payment in lieu, and I want to have a bigger conversation on that.
parking in general.
Parking in general, but and that's the
I hate having to piecemeal stuff. It's frustrating. But I understand that we have, you have to put out fires as they come, and it's hard to address something unless it's like right in the forefront of everybody's mind.
There doesn't need to be a fire.
No, please, no fires.
Well, and so this is also just going to open up for center as well. Just you have an entire row of so many different businesses that are still, like you said, one story that if you set it up can pay payment that could go towards parking structure in the future, or can go towards probably a bunch of transit.
And have
Exactly.
a car dumbwaiter that takes them up to the roof and then like puts it on there.
Can we get Boring Company here? Can we get also the bypass working? through Elon Musk.
Oh,
Like, we could do the
geez.
whole thing.
Oh, geez.
Council gives me direction and I'll make it happen.
You heard it
I've
here
had-
first,
I've had a
folks.
Big vision on top of the same God, if we wanted to segue.
Before we may segue, I want to enforce, because I think Jill's made a comment. I mean, each commissioner's statement has referenced back to the idea of wanting to fix the code first. And I want to confirm that the staff has made full attempt to do that.
Yeah.
We were, which is why this has taken so long to get to you, is there was the full attempt to not have to put you in this position. But that is an ultimate consequence, though, leaving tonight without a condition of case, there will be no additional movement. So I don't want to apply any more pressure, but the basic circumstances is if this is denied, it will relinquish. It will be a case that has been denied, but it won't be viewed in the same fashion that an approved case was, where the city would say, oh, well, the fee and lieu structure was this, it could have been this, that's where we want to change it. It will revert back to, well, that's just not an option.
Because you
for the-
can't sit in hypotheticals and sit with
Correct.
numbers and say you
Correct.
have to have a.
So while I understand that it's not the only factor that you're evaluating tonight, that is what each of you have identified as a factor. I want to let you know that without an action from the Plan Commission, there will very unlikely be any forward movement on this until we do the code revamp in general. In which case, we're opening up such an amount of the hood, so to speak, that will obviously be something we're evaluating at that time. But that is, again, going back to the priorities and strategic planning list for years down the road.
I also want to make sure that if we don't kick the code amendment down the road in some way because these folks get an exception either, you don't see that being it won't be like, it's not an immediacy.
It could, if the
anymore
council
almost.
views this as, we don't have any issue with the way you've handled this. I personally, because this is a major discretionary component, I am understandable of a portional discretionary component based on data. Like I was saying, that makes sense. When the developer comes in and says, what can I do? We really like to be able to provide, if you stay within these boundaries, you can do this. The way we're structured now, that is not a thing. It says, well, we have to go to Planning Commission and
Mhm.
see what the consequence might be.
Well, if
So don't not
course.
do anything.
if I may real quick, in answer to that question too is once this dispersed parking is built, it's got to be maintained
Mhm.
and it's going to require additional people. It's going to require, we're putting in landscaping, irrigation, all sorts of things to make it a more vibrant downtown. And changing from 30% to 70% or whatever the number is provides money to do that, because that's in the code right now. It can be used towards transit. And I've already mentioned that we're going to have a transit program here soon. That could be used for that, or it could be used to maintain parking downtown and enhance parking downtown.
Could you change when you do the code change about the percent you can do, what it could go
It's
towards?
completely open. I think Chuck and I just
So it could go
in a very
towards
loose format said,
stormwater drainage?
will flip it. Oh,
Oh.
no, it could not. It would have to be exactly, you're only paying
Use case for you.
payment in lieu for exactly
For
what
exactly
it
what
is.
it is,
That's
yeah.
part of an exaction
Yeah.
type discussion.
I'm working the stormwater. I've heard you loud and clear, and we're always working.
If we can spend the TRT on different things now, let's do it with stormwater drainage, man.
So, question on that. So how does payment in lieu actually work?
It's a
And-
direct.
Well, it is a direct replacement, but the requirement being capped at 30% is to make sure that the developers stay in check and not the city itself. Does that have any effect on it?
That was the original intention. So I think when they created the formula, that was exactly it. We don't want to allow developers just to come in and pay it
Yeah.
out. Because at the time, there were opportunities for them to produce the parking.
Yeah.
Now it's clear, I think we've evolved since this time quite a bit.
But that being,
But that's an arbitrary number based on designs of the original ordinance.
but it being in the aid of the city, if that's the way to put it, would it not also be for the city's decision to, I just kind of have an exception to that? Because it was originally intended to make sure that developers are in check? Or how does that
I'm
work?
not sure I'm following the question.
Because, so the code is that it's to be capped at 30%.
Correct.
And that's so that developers don't come in and just pay everything.
Yeah.
Correct.
But that's so that the city doesn't get screwed on public parking.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, you can't, yeah, it's a balance. It's like with,
That's exactly right.
yeah.
And so you couldn't even on the city's case, does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I understand what you, no, I can't imagine the staff recommending, it won't be our decision, right? It'll be y'all's decision, but I can't imagine us ever saying go from 0% as an opportunity. So here's a parking exemption. And by the way, you don't put pay in lieu of. I think having in fact, I'm suggesting it be a higher, and I think Corey would agree with me, because we could use that money to support parking. That is a good thing that's in the existing code.
Yeah.
That in lieu of money can't go to, sorry, drainage. It has to go to parking or transit. And those need funding as well.
Mhm.
So it could be higher, but I can't imagine, though again, we won't decide, but can't imagine us recommending or even deciding to make it 0 for quality.
I guess my question really is what is actually keeping this from that 30% being changed now as opposed to later with this use case? Because it is something that is to benefit the city's public way, not getting taken advantage of because of fee in lieu, because somebody can just come in with money.
That you're exactly right. And that was almost verbatim kind of the argument staff was making at an administrative level to appeal to the city council. But at that point, strategic and priority planning wise, it was not seen as enough of an issue. We see that. So we see the math gap and we say, hey, there's an opportunity to fix the math gap and also curb it to our advantage of the city and also the
Okay,
advantage
so
of the
that's where I said
developer.
I'm sitting inside of the eye, and from the outside, it's not seen as an issue. And okay,
So with this case.
Thank you
it
for your
will
patience,
become-
by the way. This
it-
is
it
a
will
long meeting.
become,
okay.
we have a council member here. They can look at this and say, well, we're fine with 30. And despite us being able to have gotten 70, we're fine with 30. That doesn't make mathematical sense necessarily. So I see the council being open to adjusting that to close the math
Mhm.
gap, but that number could be whatever you wanted. The number also being for a developer to come in and just say, I'm gonna fee in lieu 100%. That fee in lieu is a discretionary action. Again, another check after a public hearing. So you would have one more discretionary action to curb if there was clearly an egregious overreach from a developer and it was not altruistic or met kind of a
Yeah, I think the framework this is setting up is something that like I am just guessing. Especially having this, I think, most excellent test case. You guys are sort of the perfect, this is lawyer speak, you're the perfect plaintiffs here. In this situation, I think this is something that even just knowing the new makeup of the council within the last year, having a former planning commissioner on the council, I think is helpful for understanding sort of why this is a priority downtown. So, and I think there would be a lot of community business support for this as well, if and when it comes before them. Yeah, it's just making sure, I just want to make sure we're echoing the adjacent property owners, people come in with the expectation that they and their neighbors will be required to meet certain code requirements. And so anytime we make an exception or a variance, and I know we don't use that word anymore, but I just want to make sure we're just being thoughtful and considerate of everybody. And it seems like the discussion has really been very much focused on that. So I appreciate everyone. Do we have any more questions? Thank you for your patience, by the way. This is a sort of a massive thing. Yeah. We're honestly just stoked to be here and not in front of our laptops at home. So this would have been miserable that way. So I really appreciate, thank you. Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but just looking at this, I don't want to sound like a broken record. But just looking at this, as far as this payment is, if you were to go the other route with a city council that was in a complete agreement with the planning commission, and this is, completely.
What fairy tale land are we talking
Yeah.
about? Sorry.
The bureaucracy, don't you know? And it would just be something as simple, like if we wanted to say raise the fee in lieu for this development right here, and we wanted to say it can go up to 50%, the process for that would be, hey, city council, would you allow that for this case?
Not exactly, because that would be a deviation from the underlying code, whatever the code is applies universally. So that would be essentially a private development agreement
Yeah.
that you would make, which would have to go through full public process, but be basically you create your own zoning situation without giving away policing powers, which this could debatably do. So I'd have to have an attorney look if we could just subjectively for this project concede a different organization of the code. So the option to even subjectively do it, I'm not sure is an option.
Yeah.
It could, there are avenues. I'm not sure if we meet the legal standard for that though.
And then
Yes.
time and time and time and time. Yeah. Well, it would add more time to everything.
Absolutely.
That's the funny
Absolutely.
game
That'd
we
be
play.
a year from now
Yeah.
before we get that done.
Also, I appreciate that your design components incorporate mixed residential and commercial. That's something that gets talked about a lot, but implemented very infrequently. And we've seen in the last few years, certainly prior to the overnight accommodations freeze, a lot of those residential commercial mixed uses becoming overnight rentals prior to that. And so just the idea that you're going to be providing long-term housing for whoever your staff, I think is really great. And I think could really set the model for the downtown corridor because and I also love that you're not going to make it look like a new material gray building. Thank you. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, it's,
What's,
everyone has their right to do what they want with their property, but it's devastating anytime I see something that in that area in particular, that doesn't kind of fit the sort of, like the uranium building being in the spoke being sort of like the way it was. Yeah. Which is great.
Are we ready for a motion?
We can entertain a motion anytime someone wants to make one. There is an extremely long proposed motion in the agenda summary. Also paying attention to the parking exception approval criteria. I might just want to just address those quickly, briefly before we do. So these are the approval criteria that we, legally need to be held to in order to make this exception. I think that's important because, lawsuits are always a thing and we need to base our decision on something that's verifiable. So Corey, can you address number one? I think that's the only one that's a little more, or Corey, Chuck, that's the only one that's a little less subjective on us today. And I just want to make sure that we're taking that into account.
Yeah, so the national parking standards for the Institute of Transportation Engineers. In the study that we were looking at earlier, we did our real-time study, and then we looked at what if we just went with the Institute of Transportation Engineers projections based on analysis and not flying drones and getting real-time data. They were incredibly close to the same outcomes. So I think that as regards number one, I think it supports if commission goes that route, it supports the parking exception in this case.
Great, thank you. Number two, local studies of businesses comparable by size and type demonstrating significant parking availability with the current standard. I think there are businesses in the downtown corridor. Obviously, I think of the Spoke and the new bar next to the Spoke are sort of the most comparable things where you have a large restaurant space that is used a lot of the day. And then the new bar, which I just went to for the first time this week, which is great. That is also in an area where there's that was in the area where it's in the red with the parking study on that west half of Center Street. Yep. And there's a lot of people and everyone walks there. So, any other, and I think the parking study, I think is we'd be remiss not to cite that as well. It's obviously 2018. We know use levels have changes. We are back to pre-pandemic tourism levels. We're just about the same as we were in 2019 again, before everything got crazy, which is still very high. It's less high than it was last year, but I think that was just so outsized that any decrease probably feels significant. Obviously to business owners, it's real people's businesses and lives. Let's see, 3, present businesses, potential related to number of employees, number of customers, and turnover of customers that may support fewer parking spaces. I think the time limits on the uses of the space are incredibly important and really, I think, factor heavily into this decision, where you are sort of staggering use with the other main parking stress on that street. At least how it is right now with the food truck park. That being, people do drive to the food truck park. They provide some of their own parking, but they, you know, you want to park along the street, which is definitely some of that main parking. But you're correct in that if you go around the corner to 100 West, it gets significantly better, much faster. You know, it's kind of at worst, you have to park in front of the storage units or something like that right now. So, and everyone feel free to chime in. I'm just kind of like going down the list. Businesses located on Main Street in the C3 zone, the applicant shall demonstrate that on-street parking is reasonably available for short-term parking. Public Works Director and Zoning Administrator shall address visibility and safety concerns. I think the fact that the jailhouse building is on the corner, that's the structure on the corner, actually is very important, because I think if you suddenly have a 3-story building that comes up to the sidewalk on the corner there, I think that that corner is already kind of tricky if you're trying to go one way or another, both on a bike and then in a vehicle, because of where some of the parking is, and some of that, like, you can't see anything even around some of the corners right now. And I don't know if that's been discussed, and that's a site plan issue as well, of course, but.
And this typically in the past, we would review this exception during the site plan review.
Mhm.
That would have meant the applicant would have had to go through the full DRT approval
Yeah.
process to get there.
Yeah.
A lot of investment. So we wanted to do this as early as we could.
Yep.
So that isn't a bad way to look at this, is we are looking subjectively at the plan, as opposed to rezones where we have to almost put a wall up in our eyes
Yep.
to what is being proposed. We can include that, saying subjectively, I see that the building is being constructed this way. I don't think from the planning perspective there are any issues with this particular item, and I think from the parking study and dispersed parking, engineering concerns have been identified or addressed.
And then finally, the planning commission shall consider how future use changes may affect the future parking needs of the development. And I think that's probably one of the biggest factors, providing for the new dispersed parking that's coming in on the street, transportation that's coming in, hopefully someday our less reliance on vehicles in the downtown area, would be wonderful, for both tourists and for locals. I think that's certainly a huge factor that everybody's discussed, and the fact that this business is doing what we are asking a lot of our businesses to do, which is to redevelop to meet future use and stay local. So I think that's significant. I think it is reasonable to say that you can meet these criteria. One could reasonably say that the criteria have been met. I know it's extremely subjective, but
You're in the world of discretion now.
I
I know the
know.
commission isn't often
not
in
what I
this
signed up
place.
for.
But yeah, the discussion that we've had over the last, thank you very much, for an hour and a half, I think, or more. I think we've identified these.
Great.
So from a staff perspective, I think we've sufficiently addressed the discussion, the criteria, and the review to make a decision, however your findings might be.
Great. Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, that was fun.
I'm glad you think so too.
Thank you again for your,
You're
like,
wel-
really, truly, I know this is, you're sitting there with your whole business model on the line, and it's probably incredibly nerve-wracking, so.
I'd like to make a motion, though it's not going to be quick.
All right.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission conditionally approve Planning Resolution 10-2022, a planning resolution conditionally approving the parking exception for the Jailhouse Cafe expansion. Level 2, site plan on property located at 101 North Main Street, Moab, Utah 84532, with the following condition. 1, all outstanding comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the Moab City Engineer and Planning Director prior to building permit application approval, including A, the Planning Commission grant exception for 30 spaces, given 1, of the total 60 spaces required, 3 spaces shall be provided in the proposed development, 13 spaces shall be credited due to the existing commercial floor area, and 2, the applicant submit and apply an approved request for the maximum available parking payment in lieu at 30% of the proposed required parking spaces, such that 1, 14 spaces, make payment in lieu, 30 spaces accepted, 3 spaces provided, and 13 spaces credited, sufficiently covering the total 60 spaces required, contingent that A, the parking exception granted by the planning commission shall only apply if the submitted request for the parking payment in lieu is approved following appropriate approval procedures and shall only be applied upon approval of the proposed level 2 site plan application 22-0016 for the Jailhouse Cafe expansion. B, the land use authority denial of the parking payment in lieu request or site plan application shall terminate the parking exception granted by this planning resolution 10-2022.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Land use authority denial of the parking payment in lieu request.
In what I'm understanding is that the planning commission will be this land use authority, but whoever is the governing authority, once I double confirm on process, if any one of those items were denied, it reverts this approval back, that it is terminated. So it would not be sitting there in an approval limbo. It will have been cleared from the site.
So to clarify and just sort of reiterate, the next step, if this motion passes, is that the next thing that would come would be the parking payment in lieu request.
Correct. Public hearing and then approval. Yep.
Nothing at council still.
That's my understanding. I'll double check. I'm 98% sure council is not the land use authority on this through this public hearing. In fact, before we conclude, I'll double confirm that.
But what could happen is we could approve this motion, have the parking payment in lieu request, approve the parking payment in lieu request, and then city staff could bring through a code change to make it an across the board parking payment in lieu amendment to city council.
Their application has actually already been in far existing. So
Not for this development, but like it would,
yes,
we would say, hey, we just did this. How about we just make this code?
that would be absolutely a priority for us. We'll see, of course, with the agenda of the council, if they'd be willing to entertain of the many fixes we need to make this particular fix because of how relevant it would be. So yes, we could immediately begin drafting the ordinance for the text amendment to fix this parking code.
Great. Any other discussion?
How do you feel about stained glass?
Oh my God.
It's necessary.
This is my.
Any thoughts on incorporation? I think it would look beautiful with like a red brick building, something unmade, statuesque.
If
come
you've
pierce
never,
through.
if you've never yet watched
into
the
a-
planning commission meeting in the last 2 years. At the-
Everyone should. You should think about, keep it in
would
mind.
be Cool behind a historic bar too.
It would be.
Speakeasy as well.
Ruben,
You could have ceiling stained glass, especially if it's going to be in the back and it's going to be hidden. You have little points. You could have tables. You could work a very beautiful
We
design.
cannot make this a quid pro quo about stained glass, so be very careful here, Ruben.
To confirm, the planning commission is the land use authority throughout.
Great.
So this is your item.
Cool. But not for the code change, if the code change comes. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, we will do a roll call vote on Ruben's motion, or excuse me, Jeremy's motion, seconded by Jill. Whenever you're ready, Corey.
Thank you. Jill,
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Ruben?
Aye.
Kaya?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for, this is a big thing and y'all are sort of paving the way, so.
People are getting raises.
And we're,
Sure.
and I would, however, I will say this is not something we can require, but like, talk to Cara and Ray as much as possible. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it caught people by surprise too. I think they only knew about it because the planning commission reached out, because this wasn't a public hearing. It was kind of a weird thingy. So, yeah. 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 'Cause they're in still like sort of crisis mode after the flood. And I think it's just a lot of stuff happening all at once. Okay, thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. Future agenda items. Congratulations, by the way.
Future agenda items, to keep it short, we are going to be revisiting our dark sky and landscaping ordinances that you've reviewed.
What did the city council say? I didn't follow with the
The-
amortization stuff.
Well, if you'd like Luke to, from the horse's mouth, but in short, they really want to coordinate with the county and get some
Okay.
determinations.
That makes
The
sense,
most
yeah.
vocal council members were surprisingly silent, and I think they're waiting to coordinate with the county before they really dive into any
Yeah.
deep reviews of it. So I was a little surprised
That
how
makes
little
sense.
was discussed. With the landscaping review specifically, what I'd like us to gear towards was a breakdown, and I know we had identified this as screening, buffering, being able to take up a whole meeting. Well, that'll be one of the items we'll be bringing for discussion, is to dive into screening and buffering and get our analysis for that.
Great.
So we'll leave it at that. I think there are a few more planning approval items that are on the horizon, but I'm not sure what will be geared for us the next time. So we'll leave it there.
All right. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Jessica, Mike, Stan, Jessica. We'll miss you. For those who didn't know, this is Jessica's last planning commission meeting before she leaves the city to go back to the solid waste district. Thank you for everything you've done. You were sort of like a shot of life and help and everything I know into the department. So thank you so much. You're the best. Come back and hang out on Thursday night. You know you want to. We're gonna make you a planning commissioner soon. You know that, right? Okay, thanks everyone for your patience. This was a long night. I will adjourn this meeting at 8:47 p.m.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk about a marathon.
Thanks for understanding what's scheduled these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually worked fine.
I didn't time it. It worked out.
I really appreciate it.
Here, that's what.
Yeah.
got here at
And I
the
think
most
that's
crucial time.
Be good more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I haven't been home